I was on a cruise with my in-laws when my BIL turned to his girlfriend and said, "The abortion pills you put in her vitamins are working perfectly." My hand froze on my beer. He said it in a secret language from my wife's childhood, one she taught me but couldn't remember through the PTSD of 7 miscarriages. I froze. Tino continued, getting cockier. "There's only a month until Grandpa's will reading. If she doesn't have kids by then, we'll get $4 million. Clara cackled like a witch. "Your plan to make sure she's not pregnant was genius. I ain't getting no measly $600K. My wife Olivia sat right next to me, getting ready to take what she thought were her evening vitamins. I immediately sprawled across the table, knocking everything over while pretending to be too drunk on mimosas. You see, I knew telling her would break her heart. After our 5th loss, she'd tried to jump off our balcony, screaming that her body was a graveyard, and her brother was the one to talk her out of it. That night, I waited until everyone was asleep. My hands shook as I swapped all her pills with sugar pills from the ship's store, my mind racing. She was already pregnant again. We'd found out just before the cruise, but hadn't told anyone yet. The next morning at breakfast, I watched my brother-in-law closely. "Olivia felt nauseous this morning," I mentioned casually. "Could be morning sickness." He choked on his coffee. "She's probably just seasick." His girlfriend muttered something in their language about upping the dose. Then came the moment he'd been waiting for. Olivia suddenly grabbed her stomach during lunch, wincing. It was just food poisoning from the cheap sushi, but my BIL's face completely lit up. He actually fist-bumped his girlfriend under the table. In their language, he whispered, "We're gonna be rich, baby." Clara looked at Olivia's retreating form and mumbled in their language, "Do you ever feel, I don't know, a little bad?" Tino snorted. "For what? After the will reading, she can pop out as many as she wants. 7 miscarriages, though. 7 necessary business decisions," he corrected, taking another sip of champagne. The next day, I was refilling our drinks when I heard him on a video call with his biggest client. "You know what, Chandler? Go F yourself. I don't need your peasant money anymore." "Rough day?" I asked innocently, handing him a mojito. "Best day of my life," he slurred, already drunk before noon. "Gonna be so rich I could buy 10 companies like that dump." "Don't you want to wait until you get the will first? You know, don't count your chickens before they hatch." He laughed. "Poor people wait. Rich people plan. Big difference." That's when his girlfriend grabbed his arm, whispering in their language, "If you're so sure the pills worked, why wait? Let's celebrate now." She dragged him toward the ship's luxury boutique, and I watched him max out all his credit cards with the security of money he'd never have. By day 3, he'd completely lost it. I watched him march to the cruise director's desk, demanding to sign their Pinnacle Elite membership. 150,000, the director said carefully. "No problem," Tino slurred, signing the contract. His stupidity made me gasp. In the span of just a few days, he had already spent his entire will allowance on useless garbage. That afternoon at the buffet, when staff asked him to wait in line like everyone else, he exploded. "Do you know who I am?" he screamed. "I'm about to own this cruise line. You're all fired." Security had to escort him back to his cabin while other passengers filmed. The final night's dinner was perfect. My brother-in-law stood up, swaying in his wine-stained designer shirt. "A toast," he shouted, "to new beginnings, to successful business ventures." That's when Olivia lurched from her chair, hand over her mouth, racing for the bathroom. My brother-in-law actually smirked. "Too much rich food for her delicate stomach," he announced in English, then added in twin language to his girlfriend. "Finally. I thought those pills would never work." The ship's doctor I'd confided in 3 days ago ran into the bathroom with her. They both came back an hour later with huge smiles and an ultrasound photo. "Congratulations, Mr. Watt and Mrs. Murphy. The ultrasound confirms you're 12 weeks pregnant, with twins." I picked my wife up and twirled her around. The color drained from my brother-in-law's face like someone pulled a plug. He stammered. "That's impossible. The doses she took." Every head in the dining room turned to face him. I stood up slowly. The words were forming in my mind, ready to destroy him in the language he thought was his secret weapon. I closed my mouth and sat back down, letting the moment pass. Everyone around us started clapping and congratulating us about the twins, and I pulled Olivia close while watching Tino's face cycle through confusion and panic. He kept looking at me like he expected me to say something, but I just smiled and nodded at all the well-wishers crowding our table. The smart play wasn't burning him in front of everyone. It was building a case so tight he couldn't wiggle out of it, because Olivia's health mattered more than my satisfaction. I waited until the crowd thinned out and Tino stood up to leave, then I grabbed his elbow and pulled him close. In the secret language, I whispered that his little plan didn't work, and I knew everything he'd done. His eyes went huge and his face turned white, but I kept my voice calm and quiet. I told him to enjoy his last few weeks of freedom before everything came crashing down on his head. He tried to stammer something back, but I just patted his shoulder and walked away, leaving him standing there shaking. After dinner wrapped up and Olivia went to the bathroom, I found Conrad near the ship's medical office organizing some papers. I pulled him into an empty conference room and explained the whole vitamin swap I'd done 3 days ago, showing him the original bottles I'd kept hidden in my bag. He listened without interrupting, then pulled out his tablet and started typing up an official medical note. He documented when I'd first confided in him, what I'd observed about Tino's behavior and the protective steps I'd taken to swap the pills. He printed it out, signed it, and handed me a copy, saying this paper trail showed exactly when I discovered the problem and what I did to protect my wife. I thanked him and headed toward the security office on deck 3, my heart pounding because I needed to lock down that footage before it disappeared. The security officer who'd handled Tino's buffet meltdown was at her desk reviewing camera feeds, and I explained I needed the footage preserved for potential legal action. She pulled up her system and scrolled through the incident logs, confirming they could hold everything for 90 days if I filed a formal report. I filled out the paperwork right there, giving detailed descriptions of Tino's threatening behavior and his screaming at staff members. She stamped it with a case number and promised the footage was now flagged in their system. Walking back toward our cabin, I spotted Clara standing alone by the railing on deck 7, staring out at the ocean with her arms wrapped around herself. She looked genuinely shaken up, not her usual cocky self, and she kept glancing around like she was worried someone might see her. I realized right then that she might crack under pressure if I played this right, because she didn't have Tino's arrogance to protect her from consequences. Back in our room, Olivia jumped in the shower to wash off the day, and I immediately pulled out the swapped pill containers from my hidden bag pocket. I photographed them from every angle with my phone's camera, making sure the timestamps were visible in each shot. I uploaded everything to 3 different cloud storage accounts because I'd watched enough crime documentaries to know evidence had a way of disappearing when you needed it most. My hands were still shaking when Olivia came out of the bathroom looking pale and tired, her hand resting on her stomach. I convinced her we should go back to Conrad's office to get the food poisoning checked out properly, just to be safe for the babies. She agreed without arguing, and we walked back down to the medical office together. Conrad examined her carefully, checked her temperature and blood pressure, then wrote a detailed note about the bad sushi she'd eaten at lunch. He gave me a knowing look while he typed, understanding exactly why this documentation mattered for building our case. The next morning, I woke up early and headed to the pool deck for coffee, my mind already running through what evidence I still needed to collect. That's when I heard Tino's voice speaking the secret language near the hot tub, bragging to Clara about the custom Tesla he'd already picked out. He described this downtown condo with floor-to-ceiling windows, like the money was already sitting in his bank account, completely blind to how his whole world was about to fall apart. I stood behind a decorative palm plant and just listened, amazed at how stupid he was acting. Later that morning near the breakfast buffet, I watched Clara pull Tino aside behind a pillar and suggest in the secret language that they should up the dose to make absolutely sure it worked. I was already standing behind another decorative plant with my phone out, my hands shaking with pure rage as I hit record. I captured every single word of their casual conversation about poisoning my wife, Clara's voice suggesting they double the amount just to be safe. My finger trembled on the stop button when they finally walked away, and I had to lean against the wall for a minute to calm down. At lunch, the security officer found me at our table and handed me a printed incident report with an official case number stamped across the top. She mentioned quietly that Tino's behavior was some of the worst she'd seen in her 15 years working cruise security, and the footage showed him clearly threatening multiple staff members. She'd flagged everything in the system with priority status, meaning it wouldn't get automatically deleted after the standard 30-day period. I folded the report carefully and put it in my pocket, feeling the weight of real evidence building up piece by piece. I didn't say a word. I just stared at him until he looked away. Then I guided Olivia out of the dining room while everyone whispered behind us. That night I barely slept, lying awake planning every detail of what came next, while Olivia slept peacefully beside me with her hand resting on her stomach. The next morning, we packed our bags in silence, and I made sure to grab every single piece of evidence I'd collected during the cruise. I stuffed the swapped pill bottles deep in my carry-on, wrapped in a plastic bag so they wouldn't rattle. Olivia moved slowly, still feeling sick from the food poisoning, and I kept my hand on her lower back the entire walk to the exit. The ship's crew thanked us for sailing with them, completely unaware of the drama that had unfolded in their dining room. Tino was waiting near the gangway with Clara, both of them looking like they hadn't slept either. He stepped forward with his arms out like he wanted to hug Olivia goodbye, his smile fake and stretched too tight across his face. She turned away to grab her purse, too nauseous to notice his expression, and he dropped his arms awkwardly. I stepped between them and locked eyes with him, letting him see exactly how much I knew and how much trouble he was in. His face went pale and he took a step back, mumbling something about traffic and needing to get going. Clara grabbed his arm and pulled him toward their rental car without another word. I loaded our luggage into our car and helped Olivia into the passenger seat, making sure she had water and crackers within reach. The 3-hour drive home stretched ahead of us, and I knew I needed to use that time to figure out how to tell her the truth. I pulled onto the highway and glanced over at her sleeping against the window, her face peaceful for the first time in days. My mind kept running through different versions of the conversation. I could start with the poisoning and work backward, or I could explain about the will first to give context. Every version I practiced in my head sounded terrible, like something that would shatter her completely. I thought about her standing on our balcony after the 5th miscarriage, screaming that her body was broken. I remembered pulling her back from the edge while she fought me and Tino, talking her down in that same secret language he'd used to plan her destruction. How do you tell someone that the person who saved their life also spent years trying to end it? I merged into the right lane and adjusted my grip on the steering wheel. My hands were shaking again, just like they had when I swapped those pills. I needed professional help with this, someone who understood trauma and pregnancy loss and family betrayal. I couldn't risk doing this wrong and sending her into another crisis. The twins needed her calm and healthy, and I needed her to survive hearing this truth. By the time we pulled into our driveway, I decided to find a therapist before saying anything. It felt like another betrayal, keeping secrets for even longer, but I couldn't see another way to do this safely. I helped Olivia inside, and she went straight to the couch, curling up with her hand on her belly. She looked up at me with this cautious joy in her eyes, the first real hope I'd seen in years. She started talking about baby names, suggesting options for both boys and girls since we didn't know yet. I sat down next to her and smiled, participating in the conversation while my stomach twisted with guilt. She liked Adeline and Noah, classic names that wouldn't get our kids teased at the school. I agreed with everything she said, adding my own suggestions, the whole time knowing I was lying by not telling her what her brother had done. Every hour I delayed felt like another small betrayal, another choice to protect her that took away her right to know the truth. She fell asleep around 9, exhausted from the pregnancy and the cruise, and I waited until her breathing was deep and steady. Then I grabbed my laptop and spent the next 2 hours organizing every piece of evidence I'd collected. I created folders for the audio recordings, the photos of the pills, the cruise incident reports, and the medical documentation from Conrad. I backed everything up to 3 different cloud storage accounts, using encrypted passwords that only I knew. I made a master document with timestamps for every recording, transcripts of what Tino and Clara had said, and links to all the supporting evidence. This needed to be perfect, airtight, impossible to dismiss or explain away. I saved everything one more time and closed my laptop around midnight, my eyes burning from staring at the screen. The next morning, I woke up early and started searching for certified translators online. The secret language Olivia and Tino spoke wasn't common, some regional dialect from their childhood that barely existed in written form. I called 6 different translation services and got nowhere, each one telling me they didn't have anyone who specialized in that specific variant. On the 7th call, the receptionist mentioned Sapphira Wyatt, a legal translator who handled rare language cases. I called her office immediately and explained what I needed without going into too much detail. She asked me to send a sample recording so she could verify she could handle the dialect. I sent her a 30-second clip of Tino talking about the pills, and she called back within an hour confirming she could do it. Her rate was expensive, but I didn't care. This was too important to cut corners. While I was on the phone with Sapphira, I remembered Conrad mentioning a high-risk OBGYN back home who specialized in cases like Olivia's. I called their office and explained her history of 7 losses, the current twin pregnancy, and the circumstances we were dealing with. The receptionist's voice changed when I mentioned the number of miscarriages, becoming softer and more urgent. She said they could fit us in within 48 hours, which was faster than their normal scheduling. I booked the appointment and felt the first small bit of relief that we were building a real medical support team. I checked our shared family account monitoring system that afternoon, something I'd set up months ago to track expenses. Tino's spending spree showed up in detail, every transaction from the cruise visible in the records. The Pinnacle membership was there for $150,000, then designer clothes from the ship's boutique, electronics, restaurant bills that made my eyes water. He'd spent over $60,000 in just a few days, burning through money he didn't actually have yet. Part of me felt satisfied watching him dig his own grave, spending his inheritance before he ever got it. He was so confident in his plan that he'd already started living like a millionaire. On day 3 home, I sat in my car after work and realized I couldn't tell Olivia alone. The risk of her spiraling was too high, the betrayal too deep and personal. I needed a therapist present, someone who could help her process this safely without sending her into another crisis, someone who understood pregnancy loss trauma and complicated family dynamics. I spent the next 2 days calling every therapist in our area who specialized in reproductive trauma. Most were booked months out or didn't handle cases this complex. I left messages, sent emails, explained the urgency without revealing too many details. On the 6th call, I reached Faye Holloway's office, and her assistant listened to my situation carefully. She said Faye specialized in exactly this kind of case, reproductive trauma combined with family betrayal. Faye had an opening the following week and could do an emergency intake session where I could disclose everything with professional support in the room. I booked it immediately, feeling like I'd finally found someone who could help us through this. Sapphira called back that evening while I was making dinner. She explained her process in detail, how she'd need the original audio files with full context about the relationship and the circumstances. She'd have to verify the dialect authenticity, confirm the speakers' identities, and create both a preliminary transcript and a certified legal version. The preliminary version would take about 10 days, she said, with the certified version following a few days after that. I sent her everything that night using encrypted file transfer, every recording I'd made on the cruise with detailed notes about who was speaking and when. She confirmed receipt and promised to start working on it immediately, understanding how time-sensitive this was for us. 2 days later, we sat in the high-risk OBGYN's office while the doctor pulled up Olivia's medical history on her computer screen. She scrolled through the records slowly, her face getting more serious with each page. 7 documented losses over 4 years, each one noted with dates and circumstances. The doctor turned to face us and started asking detailed questions about each pregnancy, how far along Olivia had been, what symptoms she'd experienced, whether there were any patterns we'd noticed. I watched Olivia's hands twist together in her lap as she answered, her voice getting quieter with each loss she had to recount. The doctor typed notes constantly, nodding and making small sounds of acknowledgement. After 20 minutes of questions, she put down her tablet and explained that Olivia's case qualified as recurrent pregnancy loss, which meant we needed aggressive monitoring and support. She pulled out a calendar and started marking dates, explaining that we'd need weekly ultrasounds to track the twins' growth and watch for any warning signs. She wrote a prescription for progesterone supplements that Olivia would need to take twice daily, explaining how the hormone helped maintain the uterine lining and reduce miscarriage risk. Then she looked at both of us directly and said, stress management wasn't optional anymore, it was medical treatment. She explained how high cortisol levels could affect blood flow to the placenta and impact fetal development. Olivia needed to treat rest and calm as seriously as taking vitamins, because her body was working double time to support 2 babies after years of trauma. The appointment lasted 90 minutes and we left with a thick folder of information, multiple prescriptions, and our first ultrasound scheduled for the following week. The following week, I drove us to Faye's office for the emergency intake session I'd scheduled. The building was older with creaky wooden floors, and Faye's office had soft lighting and comfortable chairs that didn't feel clinical. She was probably in her 50s with gray-streaked hair pulled back, wearing casual clothes that made the space feel more like a living room than a therapy office. She spent the first 15 minutes just talking with Olivia about the pregnancy, asking how she was feeling physically, what her hopes and fears were. I could see Olivia starting to relax slightly, her shoulders dropping from where they'd been hunched near her ears. Then Faye turned to me and asked if I wanted to share what had brought us in for an emergency session. My mouth went dry and I looked at Olivia, then back at Faye. I started with the cruise, explaining that we'd gone with family to celebrate before the baby came. Then I told them about overhearing a conversation in a language Olivia had taught me years ago, one she and her brother had spoken as kids. Faye asked what I'd heard, and I explained about the abortion pills, about Clara putting them in Olivia's vitamins, about the inheritance tied to whether Olivia had kids by the will reading. Olivia's face went completely blank for a moment, like her brain couldn't process what I was saying. Then her eyes got huge, and she turned to look at me with her mouth slightly open. I kept talking, explaining how I'd swapped the pills immediately, how I'd documented everything, how I'd waited to tell her until we had professional support. Olivia stood up suddenly, her chair scraping against the floor. Her face cycled through confusion, then denial, shaking her head like she could make the words untrue. Then understanding hit, and her expression shifted to pure horror, her hand going to her stomach protectively. She looked at me and her face twisted with rage so intense, I actually leaned back in my chair. She started screaming that her brother had killed her babies, all 7 of them, for money. Her voice got higher and louder with each word, asking how someone could do that to their own sister. Then she whirled on me and screamed that I'd known for over a week and hadn't told her, that I'd made decisions about her body and her safety without including her. She said everyone in her life was a liar, her brother had been poisoning her for years while pretending to care, and I'd kept this massive secret while acting like everything was normal. Her breathing got faster and shallower, and she started gasping between words. Faye stood up and moved closer to Olivia, speaking in a calm, low voice about breathing and grounding. She asked Olivia to name 5 things she could see in the room, then 4 things she could touch. Olivia was crying and hyperventilating, but she started naming objects with Faye's guidance. Her breathing slowly evened out over several minutes while I sat frozen in my chair, feeling like the worst person alive. I'd thought I was protecting her by waiting, but she was right that I'd taken away her choice. Faye kept Olivia focused on breathing and grounding for almost 10 minutes before the panic subsided enough for us to keep talking. Olivia collapsed back into her chair looking exhausted, tears still running down her face. She said she didn't know who to trust anymore, or how to process that her brother had spent years systematically killing her babies. Faye acknowledged how massive this betrayal was, how it touched every part of Olivia's life and identity. She said it was completely normal to feel overwhelmed and furious and lost all at once. We spent the next hour and a half working through what happens next. Faye kept bringing us back to priorities, asking what mattered most right now in this moment. Olivia said keeping the twins safe was number one. Nothing else mattered if we lost these babies too. Faye wrote that down on a whiteboard, then asked what else. I said gathering evidence so we could hold Tino accountable legally. Faye wrote that as number two. Olivia said confronting Tino came last because she couldn't handle seeing him right now without completely losing it. Faye created a clear plan on the board with 3 columns for safety, evidence, and eventual confrontation. Under safety, she listed all of Olivia's medical appointments, stress reduction requirements, and daily check-ins between us about how we were feeling. Under evidence, she listed the recordings I'd already made, the translator work in progress, and any legal consultations we needed. Under confrontation, she just wrote, "When ready," and with support. She made us both promise to communicate every single day about our emotional state, even if it was just a quick text saying we were okay. She gave us her emergency number and made us promise to call immediately if either of us felt overwhelmed or unsafe. By the end of the 2-hour session, we had a clear plan that felt manageable instead of crushing. Olivia was still angry with me. I could see it in how she wouldn't quite look at me directly, but she agreed the plan made sense. Faye scheduled us for weekly sessions and said we'd need couples work and individual work to process everything. That evening after we got home, I sat down at my laptop and prepared the audio files to send to Sapphira. I filled out the release forms she'd sent, signing everywhere that needed signatures and dating each page. I wrote a detailed email explaining who the speakers were, what our relationship was, and why we needed certified translation for legal purposes. I attached all 12 audio clips with timestamps and descriptions of what was discussed in each one. Before I hit send, I encrypted everything using the secure file transfer system Sapphira had provided. The upload took almost 20 minutes because the audio files were high quality. Sapphira responded within an hour, confirming she'd received everything, and the files had downloaded successfully. She explained in her email that legal certification was more complex than standard translation because she needed to verify several things. First, she had to confirm the speakers' identities through voice analysis and any identifying information in the recordings. Second, she needed to authenticate that the recordings hadn't been edited or manipulated. Third, she had to verify the dialect authenticity by comparing it to known samples of the language variant. All of this documentation was required to make the translation admissible in court proceedings. She estimated the preliminary transcript would take about 10 days to complete, with the certified version following 3 to 5 days after that. The timeline felt long, but I understood why it couldn't be rushed. Our second OBGYN appointment came a week later, and this time the doctor spent more time reviewing the previous losses. She asked specific questions about what had happened with each pregnancy, looking for any patterns or warning signs we might have missed. When I mentioned the vitamins Olivia had been taking, the doctor made detailed notes and asked about the brand, dosage, and how long she'd been using them. She explained that chronic stress from repeated losses could actually impact pregnancy outcomes by keeping cortisol levels constantly high. The body interprets ongoing stress as a dangerous environment, which can affect hormone production and blood flow to the uterus. She prescribed specific relaxation techniques including guided meditation, deep breathing exercises, and progressive muscle relaxation. She referred us to a prenatal yoga class that met twice a week and specialized in high-risk pregnancies. The instructor apparently had training in trauma-informed practices, which the doctor said was important given Olivia's history. Then she looked at both of us seriously and said Olivia needed to avoid emotional upheaval as much as humanly possible. She acknowledged that life doesn't always cooperate with medical advice, but we needed to treat emotional calm as a prescription, not a suggestion. She explained that the twins were developing normally so far, but twin pregnancies carried higher risks even without Olivia's complicated history. We needed to do everything possible to reduce stress and support her body through this. 2 days after that appointment, I contacted Lucian Mansfield using the information a colleague had given me. His office was downtown in one of those old buildings with marble floors and wood paneling. I called and explained to his assistant that I needed help understanding a will's conditions and some legal options regarding inheritance and poisoning. The assistant asked a few screening questions, then said Lucian could see us the following week for an initial consultation. I booked the appointment and spent the next few days organizing all our documentation. I created a timeline of events, printed out bank records showing Tino's spending, and compiled the cruise incident reports. I wanted to walk into that meeting with everything organized so we could use the time efficiently. The consultation with Lucian happened in his conference room with a view of the city. He was probably 60 with silver hair and reading glasses that he kept taking on and off. We spent the first 20 minutes just explaining the situation while he took notes on a legal pad. Then he asked to see grandfather Thaddeus's will, which I'd brought a copy of. He read through it carefully, marking certain sections with sticky notes. After about 15 minutes of reading, he looked up and explained something I hadn't understood before. The will had what he called a discretionary conduct clause that gave the trustee power to delay or deny distributions if an heir's behavior caused harm to other family members. He said this was actually more powerful than the pregnancy deadline because it focused on Tino's actions rather than Olivia's pregnancy status. We didn't have to prove that Tino had violated the pregnancy condition by poisoning her. We just needed to show that he'd acted with malicious intent to harm Olivia and the trustee could use their discretion to pause or deny his inheritance based on that conduct. Lucian explained that discretionary clauses existed specifically for situations like this, where someone tried to manipulate inheritance conditions through harmful actions. The trustee's job was to evaluate whether distributing money to Tino would be appropriate given his behavior toward another beneficiary. This completely changed how I understood our legal position. That same afternoon, my email pinged with a message from the cruise security office. They'd sent the full incident report as a PDF attachment, along with a spreadsheet listing available footage timestamps. The report documented 3 separate incidents where Tino had threatened staff members, used profane language toward other passengers, and refused to follow crew instructions. Each incident had detailed witness statements from staff and passengers who'd observed his behavior. The footage timestamps covered everything from his explosion at the buffet to his confrontation with the cruise director about the membership. The security officer's notes described his behavior as aggressive, entitled, and potentially dangerous. She'd noted that his claims about owning the cruise line and firing staff members suggested either substance abuse or mental instability. The report included photos of the signed Pinnacle membership contract showing the amount and his signature. Everything was documented with official letterhead and case numbers, creating a chain of custody that proved when and how each incident occurred. I downloaded everything to 3 different backup locations and added it to our evidence file. The next week, Olivia and I went back to Faye's office for our second couples session. This time, Faye focused specifically on rebuilding trust between us after my delayed disclosure. She asked me directly why I'd waited over a week to tell Olivia about the poisoning. I explained that I was scared she'd spiral into another crisis like after the 5th loss, that I wanted professional support in place first. Faye nodded and asked if I understood how that decision had taken away Olivia's agency over information about her own body. I said yes, I got it now, but in the moment I'd only been thinking about keeping her safe. Faye explained that my protective instinct wasn't wrong, but the execution was, because I'd made a unilateral decision that affected both of us. She had Olivia explain how it felt to learn I'd known for days while acting normal, and Olivia said it made her question whether she could trust me to be honest when things were hard. We spent an hour creating specific agreements about communication going forward. I promised to share information that affected her immediately, even if I was scared of her reaction. She promised to tell me when she felt overwhelmed, so we could get support together instead of me making assumptions. We agreed to daily check-ins where we each shared one thing we were feeling, even if it was uncomfortable. Faye said rebuilding trust after a breach takes consistent action over time, not just apologies. She gave us homework to practice the daily check-ins and to notice when we felt tempted to hide things from each other to avoid conflict. 2 days after our therapy session, an email from Sapphira landed in my inbox with a PDF attachment labeled Preliminary Transcript Analysis. I opened it at the kitchen table while Olivia was showering, and my hands started shaking as I read through the first page. Sapphira had organized everything by timestamp and topic, with notes about audio clarity and dialect verification next to each section. She'd found 12 separate conversations where Tino and Clara discussed the poisoning in detail. Instance 1 was from the pool deck when Clara asked about increasing the dosage. Instance 4 was Tino bragging about his 7 successful attempts. Instance 9 was them calculating how to split the $4 million. Each conversation was transcribed word for word in both the original language and English, with Sapphira's certification stamp on every page. The notes explained that the dialect was authentic to the region where Olivia and Tino grew up, and certain phrases could only be spoken by native speakers from that specific area. I printed 3 copies and locked them in our fireproof safe before Olivia came downstairs. That afternoon, Olivia sat on our bed with her phone in both hands, typing and deleting the same message to Tino over and over. Her fingers moved across the screen, then stopped, then started again. I offered to write it for her, but she shook her head hard. She needed to do this herself, she said, because setting boundaries was part of taking back control. After 20 minutes, she showed me the final version. It said she needed space to focus on her health and wouldn't be in contact until after the will reading. No explanation, no accusations, just a clear statement of what she needed. Her thumb hovered over the send button for a full minute before she finally pressed it. The message showed as delivered, then read within seconds. Olivia powered off her phone immediately and handed it to me to hold. The next morning, Tino's name lit up Olivia's phone screen at 7 in the morning. I was making breakfast when it started buzzing on the counter, and Olivia froze with her orange juice halfway to her mouth. She walked over slowly and stared at the screen, tears already forming in her eyes. The phone kept ringing and ringing, and I could see her face crumbling as she watched his name flash over and over. When it finally stopped, a voicemail notification popped up. Olivia didn't listen to it. She just stood there shaking, and then she declined the call history, went into her settings, and blocked his number without saying a single word to me. Her hands were steady when she did it, even though her face was wet. 3 hours later, Clara's name appeared in a text message that made Olivia laugh in this harsh, bitter way that scared me. The message said she was sorry if anything seemed weird on the cruise, and she hoped Olivia was feeling better. No mention of pills, no mention of Tino's plan, just this careful non-apology that avoided admitting anything specific. Olivia turned her phone toward me so I could read it, and she said Clara was covering herself now that she realized there might be consequences. She didn't respond to the message, just screenshotted it and added it to our evidence folder. Our weekly ultrasound appointment fell on Thursday morning, and the tech did all the normal measurements while Olivia lay on the exam table watching the monitor. Both babies looked good, moving around and measuring right on schedule. But when the doctor came in to review everything, she frowned at the blood pressure reading and took it again manually. The second reading came back even higher than the first. The doctor sat down and explained that Olivia's numbers were creeping into a concerning range, and we needed to treat stress reduction as seriously as we treated prenatal vitamins. She said high cortisol levels from ongoing stress could affect how the babies developed, and this wasn't optional anymore. She prescribed specific breathing exercises, cut Olivia's work hours to part-time, and scheduled twice-weekly monitoring appointments to track the blood pressure trend. Olivia nodded through all of it, looking pale and scared, and I held her hand the whole drive home. That same afternoon, Lucian called my cell with information about grandfather Thaddeus's will that changed how I understood our entire situation. He explained that Olivia's pregnancy status at the reading wasn't actually the controlling factor for distribution, because the will included something called a discretionary conduct clause. The trustee had the power to pause or deny funds to any heir whose behavior harmed another family member, regardless of whether they technically met the inheritance conditions. This meant that even if Tino thought he'd won by preventing Olivia's pregnancy, the trustee could still investigate his actions and hold his money indefinitely. Lucian said these clauses existed specifically for situations like ours, where someone tried to manipulate inheritance rules through harmful acts. I asked him how strong our case was, and he said with the evidence we had, extremely strong. Over the next week, I turned our spare bedroom into a war room for organizing evidence. I spread everything across the desk in chronological order, starting with the crew's audio recordings and ending with Clara's non-apology text. I had Dr. Holloway's medical notes documenting the vitamin swap and Olivia's miscarriage history. I had the crew security incident report with timestamps of Tino's 3 separate outbursts. I had bank statements showing Tino's spending spree, including the $150,000 cruise membership he signed while drunk. I had photos of the original poisoned vitamins next to the sugar pills I'd swapped them with, all with metadata showing when and where I took them. I compiled everything into a master document with a table of contents, exhibits labeled A through M, and a timeline that showed exactly when each event happened. The final dossier was 60 pages long and told the complete story from start to finish. I printed 5 copies and saved digital versions in 3 different cloud accounts with different passwords. 10 days after sending the preliminary transcript, Sapphira emailed again with the completed certified translation. This version had a notarized affidavit attached that confirmed she'd personally verified the speakers' identities by comparing voice patterns to reference recordings. She'd authenticated the dialect as genuine and specific to the geographic region. She'd certified the content accuracy and translation quality according to legal standards for court admissibility. The affidavit explained that her certification made the transcript valid evidence in both civil and criminal proceedings, which meant we had real legal power now. She'd included her credentials, professional certifications, and a statement that she'd stake her reputation on the accuracy of this work. I added the certified version to our evidence dossier and updated all the backup copies. Every morning for the next 2 weeks, I heard Olivia in the bathroom practicing what she'd say to Tino at the will reading. She stood in front of the mirror with her hands on her belly, saying the words out loud over and over. She told her reflection that she knew everything, that she had proof of everything, and that she wouldn't have contact with him until all legal matters were resolved. Her voice cracked the first few times, but by the end of the second week, she could say it without crying. Faye coached her through different scenarios during our therapy sessions, playing Tino's role and throwing out the kinds of denials and manipulations he might try. Olivia practiced staying calm when Faye pretended to call her crazy, when she acted like the evidence was fake, when she played the victim card. By the end of each session, Olivia could deliver her statement clearly and firmly, no matter what reaction Faye threw at her. 3 days before the will reading, Lucian called with strategic advice that surprised me. He said we shouldn't ambush Tino at the reading itself, because that could make us look vindictive and hurt the trustee's ability to make an objective decision. Instead, he suggested we share all our evidence privately with the trustee's office beforehand and let the professional process handle the confrontation. He explained that trustees dealt with family conflicts all the time and knew how to manage these situations without turning them into public spectacles. If we handed over the evidence quietly, the trustee could review everything, make informed decisions, and control how information got disclosed at the reading. This approach protected our credibility and gave the trustee the power to shut down any of Tino's attempts to manipulate the situation. I asked Olivia what she thought, and she agreed that letting professionals handle it was smarter than trying to have our dramatic moment. We wanted justice and protection, not revenge theater. 2 days after our strategy session with Lucian, a notification popped up on my phone while I was making breakfast. Clara had sent me a direct message through Instagram, which surprised me because we'd never communicated that way before. Her message was short, but I could feel the panic through the screen. She wrote that she needed to talk to me privately and asked if we could meet somewhere public. The way she phrased everything made it clear she was scared about what might happen to her legally. She hinted that she had information to share, but wanted to know what kind of trouble she was facing first. I showed the message to Olivia, and she stared at it for a long time before nodding. We both knew Clara was trying to save herself, but if she had evidence, we needed it. I messaged back suggesting a coffee shop downtown that was always busy, picking a place where she couldn't try anything stupid. She agreed immediately, and we set it for the next afternoon at 2 o'clock. The rest of that day dragged by while I thought about what Clara might offer and whether it would actually help our case. I kept checking my phone to see if she'd cancel, but she didn't send anything else. The next day, I arrived at the coffee shop 15 minutes early and picked a table near the windows where other people could see us clearly. Clara showed up exactly on time, looking terrible, with dark circles under her eyes and her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She ordered a latte and sat down across from me, her hands shaking as she wrapped them around the cup. She started talking fast, saying she knew about the pills, but Tino had pressured her into helping. She claimed he'd told her the vitamins were just to prevent pregnancy, not cause miscarriages, and she'd believed him at first. I didn't buy that excuse for a second, but I let her keep talking. She said she had the remaining poison at home and screenshots of texts where they'd discussed getting it. Then she got to the real point, asking if she handed everything over, would it keep her out of jail? She kept repeating that question in different ways, making it obvious her cooperation was about saving herself, not making things right. I told her I couldn't make any promises about criminal charges, but having evidence would definitely matter. She nodded and asked when I could meet again to get everything from her. I left the coffee shop and walked straight to my car, pulling out my phone before I even started the engine. Lucian answered on the second ring, and I explained the whole conversation while sitting in the parking lot. He listened carefully and then told me he couldn't grant Clara any kind of immunity because that wasn't how the system worked. He said he could note her cooperation to authorities if she provided solid evidence, which might help her case when prosecutors got involved. Then he warned me that her cooperation was probably more about self-preservation than genuine remorse, but useful evidence was still useful regardless of her motives. He told me to get whatever she was offering and document everything about how she gave it to me. I asked if I should record our next meeting and he said yes, making sure my phone was visible, so she knew she was recorded. That way there couldn't be any question later about what she said or gave me. Clara and I met again the next day at the same coffee shop. This time she brought a folder stuffed with papers and her phone ready to show me screenshots. She handed over photos of the pill packaging that showed the brand name and dosage information clearly. The screenshots showed text conversations between her and Tino where they discussed where to buy the substance and how much to use. She'd even kept her own bottle of the stuff they'd used, a small amber container with a medical label that made my stomach turn. Her hands shook the whole time she was giving me everything, making the papers rustle. She kept asking if this would keep her out of jail, her voice getting higher each time. I took photos of everything with my phone right there at the table and told her again that I couldn't make promises, but this was the right thing to do. She looked like she might cry, but held it together. Before she left, she made me promise to tell the lawyer she cooperated, and I said I would because it was true. That week, we had our regular therapy session with Faye, and I brought the folder Clara had given me. Olivia and I sat on the couch in Faye's office while I explained the new evidence and what Clara had admitted. Faye listened to everything, and then helped us talk through what it meant without letting it take over our whole focus. She reminded us that our main goal was safety, and making sure Tino was held accountable, not getting revenge or making people suffer. She pointed out that we needed to stay focused on the baby's health above everything else, because stress could affect the pregnancy. Olivia admitted she felt angry that Clara was trying to save herself after helping poison her for months. Faye validated that anger, but also helped Olivia see that Clara's cooperation gave us tools to protect our family. By the end of the session, we both felt more centered and clear about what mattered most. 2 days later, we had our scheduled ultrasound appointment. The doctor squeezed gel on Olivia's belly and moved the wand around while we watched the screen. Both babies appeared on the monitor, their tiny hearts beating fast and strong. The doctor measured them carefully and said they were growing right on schedule for their gestational age. Then she explained the real risks we needed to watch for with twin pregnancy. She talked about preeclampsia, which meant Olivia's blood pressure could get dangerous. She mentioned premature delivery was more common with twins, and we might need to plan for an early birth. She explained signs to watch for like sudden swelling or severe headaches. But she also said everything looked good right now, and she was optimistic about the pregnancy. We left feeling hopeful, but also aware that we needed to be careful and watch for problems. The following week, Lucian called to tell us he'd scheduled a private meeting with Dex from the trustee's office. The meeting was set for the week before the will reading, giving Dex time to review everything thoroughly. Lucian explained that presenting evidence privately was smarter than ambushing Tino at the reading itself. This way, the trustee could look at everything carefully and make informed decisions about who should get money and who shouldn't. He said trustees dealt with family conflicts all the time and knew how to handle these situations professionally. If we gave Dex the evidence ahead of time, he could control how information got shared at the reading and shut down any attempts by Tino to manipulate things. Lucian reminded us this protected our credibility and let professionals handle the confrontation instead of us trying to create some dramatic moment. On the day of our meeting with Dex, Lucian met us at the trustee's office downtown. We brought the complete evidence packet we'd been building for weeks. Inside were the certified transcripts from Sapphira, all of Dr. Holloway's medical notes from the cruise, the witness statements, Clara's cooperation evidence with the photos and texts, and the cruise documentation about Tino's behavior. Dex sat behind a big desk and opened the folder, reading through the table of contents first. His expression got more and more serious as he flipped through pages. He stopped on the transcript section and read some of the translated conversations out loud to himself. Then he looked up at us and said, "This was thorough work." He promised to investigate everything completely before any money got distributed to anyone. He made notes on a legal pad about things he wanted to verify independently. The meeting lasted almost 2 hours, and by the end, Dex seemed convinced we had a real case. 3 days before the will reading, an envelope arrived from the cruise line's legal department. Inside was a formal letter on company letterhead describing Tino's behavior during the cruise. The letter said he'd been threatening and aggressive toward staff members. It listed specific incidents where employees had filed formal complaints about him. There were details about his screaming match at the buffet and his demands that he owned the cruise line. This documentation came from a completely neutral third party who had no reason to lie or exaggerate. The cruise line's lawyers had no stake in our family drama, which made their letter really powerful evidence. I scanned it immediately and sent copies to both Lucian and Dex, adding it to our case file. That same week, someone sent me a link to a public review posted online about Tino's business. His former client, Chandler, had written a detailed review about Tino's unprofessional conduct and breach of contract. The review explained how Tino had cursed at him during a video call and refused to complete work he'd been paid for. What made it even better was Tino's response in the comments. He'd written a long ranting comment about not needing peasant clients anymore and how he was about to be rich enough to buy 10 companies. His comment was public for anyone to see, creating a permanent digital record of his arrogance and terrible judgment. I screenshot the whole exchange and added it to our evidence file, knowing it showed exactly what kind of person Tino really was. 2 days after I added that screenshot to our file, Sapphira sent an email confirming she could attend the will reading in person if we needed her there. She explained that having the certified translator present meant Tino couldn't argue the transcripts were fake or mistranslated wrong. Her physical presence would shut down any escape route he tried to use about the language evidence. I forwarded her confirmation to Lucian immediately, and he responded within an hour saying this was perfect for our case. The next afternoon, Lucian called us to his office for a coaching session about the will reading itself. He sat across from us at his conference table and explained that Tino's parents would probably try to defend him or pressure Olivia into forgiving him for family peace. He coached us through different scenarios, making us practice staying calm and referring all questions to him as our attorney. He told us to keep our responses short and professional, not to get pulled into emotional arguments or family guilt trips. Olivia practiced saying simple phrases like asking Lucian to answer that question or stating she wasn't discussing it right now. By the end of the session, we both felt more prepared to handle whatever Tino's family threw at us during the reading. 3 days before the scheduled will reading, an envelope arrived at our house from a legal courier service. Inside was a short written statement from Clara on official letterhead from a lawyer's office. She admitted her role in the poisoning scheme and wrote that she was scared of Tino's reaction if she'd refused to help him. Her statement was obviously self-serving, trying to paint herself as a victim of his manipulation rather than a willing partner. But it still worked for our case because it gave the trustee another source confirming the same story we were telling. I scanned Clara's statement and sent it to both Lucian and Dex, adding one more piece to the pile of evidence against Tino. The night before the will reading, Olivia and I sat in our living room talking about what we actually wanted from tomorrow. We were both exhausted from weeks of evidence gathering and legal preparation. She said she didn't want some big dramatic moment where we humiliated Tino in front of everyone. She just wanted the trustee process to handle everything professionally while we focused on staying calm for the babies. I agreed completely because revenge satisfaction wasn't worth risking her blood pressure or the pregnancy. We called Faye on speakerphone and told her our decision to let the professionals handle the confrontation. She said this choice was mature and healthy, that we were prioritizing our actual family over the satisfaction of watching Tino crash. Her validation made us both feel better about taking the quiet route instead of the spectacle route. On the morning of the will reading, we met with Dex privately at his office an hour before the official reading started. We brought the final evidence packet that included everything from the past month, Clara's new statement, and the cruise line's formal letter. Dex spread all the documents across his desk and read through them carefully, making notes on a legal pad. His expression got more serious with each page he reviewed. When he reached the translated conversations about poisoning, he read several passages out loud to himself and shook his head slowly. He looked up at us after 20 minutes and said this was thorough professional work. He promised to handle the distribution hold announcement professionally and to give Tino a chance to respond to the allegations before making any final decisions. We thanked him and headed to the lobby to wait for the reading to start. In the lobby outside the conference room, other family members started arriving 15 minutes before the scheduled start time. Tino walked in wearing a brand new designer suit and flashing a luxury watch that probably cost $10,000. He was whispering to Clara in the secret language about his guaranteed payout and how he'd already picked out the car he wanted. He looked so confident and relaxed, like he'd already won everything. He didn't notice Dex standing near the reception desk watching him with a cold, professional look. Clara seemed nervous, her eyes darting around the lobby and avoiding eye contact with us. Tino's parents arrived next and hugged Olivia, asking how she was feeling with the pregnancy. She smiled and said she was doing well, keeping her responses short like Lucian had coached. The reading began exactly on time in a large conference room with a long table. Lucian started by outlining the will's basic structure and then explained the discretionary clause about conduct that harms family members. He read the exact language from the will about how the trustee could delay or deny distributions if an heir acted badly toward other family members. Tino barely paid attention, scrolling through his phone and smirking at something on his screen. He looked completely unaware that the trustee already knew everything about his poisoning scheme. His parents listened carefully to Lucian's explanation, but Tino just seemed bored and ready to get his money. Then Dex stood up and cleared his throat to get everyone's attention. He announced that Tino's distribution was temporarily on hold, pending review of materials submitted about his conduct toward family members. The entire room went completely silent. You could hear people breathing and the air conditioning humming. Tino's face shifted from bored confidence to confused panic in about 2 seconds. He looked around the table trying to figure out what went wrong with his perfect plan. His parents exchanged worried glances and Clara went pale, staring down at her hands. Tino jumped up from his chair and demanded to know what materials and who submitted them. His voice got loud and aggressive, the same tone he'd used on the cruise when he screamed at the buffet staff. Dex remained calm and professional, explaining that he'd received evidence about Tino's conduct and needed to investigate before releasing any funds. That's when Sapphira stood up from her seat near the back of the room. She introduced herself as a certified translator and explained she'd been hired to translate recordings made during a family cruise. She opened a folder and started reading from the certified transcript in a calm, clear voice. She read Tino's exact words about the abortion pills working perfectly. She read his conversation about the $4 million inheritance if Olivia didn't have kids. She read Clara's response about not wanting a measly $600,000. She read their discussion about upping the dosage and their celebration about being rich. Tino's parents gasped out loud and his mother put her hand over her mouth. Clara started crying, tears running down her face as she heard her own words read back. Tino's face went from angry red to sick white as his own voice in translation condemned him in front of his entire family. He tried to interrupt, but Sapphira kept reading, her voice steady and professional. She read the part about 7 necessary business decisions and Tino's comment about Olivia popping out babies after the will reading. By the time Sapphira finished reading, Tino's father was staring at him with complete horror and disgust. Then Olivia stood up with her hands shaking but her voice firm. She'd prepared a statement with Faye's help and practiced it dozens of times. She said she knew everything about what Tino did. She had evidence of everything, including medical records and witness statements. She would not have any contact with Tino until all legal matters were completely resolved. Her voice cracked on a few words, but she kept going, reading from the paper in her hands. She said her brother had tried to kill her babies for money, and she would never forgive that betrayal. She said the trust could do whatever it wanted with his money, but she wanted nothing to do with him anymore. When she finished, she sat down and grabbed my hand under the table. I'd never been more proud of her strength and courage in that moment, watching her set boundaries and speak her truth despite everything. That afternoon, Lucian drove us to the police station in his car, while I held Olivia's hand in the back seat. She stared out the window without saying anything, and I could feel her fingers trembling against mine. The detective who met us was a woman in her 40s with short gray hair who introduced herself and led us to a small interview room with a table and chairs. Lucian explained we were there to report poisoning and conspiracy, and the detective pulled out a notepad and started taking notes. She asked Olivia to describe what happened, and Olivia's voice shook as she explained the 7 miscarriages and how she thought her body was broken. I handed over the evidence folder with all the recordings and transcripts and medical records, and the detective spent 20 minutes reviewing everything without speaking. When she finally looked up, her expression was serious, and she said the quality of evidence made this a strong case for prosecution. She explained they would need to interview Clara separately and collect the remaining pills as physical evidence, and that the investigation would take several weeks minimum. Lucian asked about keeping this quiet to protect Olivia's privacy, and the detective nodded, saying they would handle it professionally without media involvement. We spent 2 more hours going through every detail and signing statements, and by the time we left the station, it was dark outside. Within 48 hours, Clara called the detective directly and asked to come in. The detective contacted Lucian first to let us know, and explained that Clara wanted cooperation credit to reduce her own charges. Clara showed up at the station with a lawyer and turned over the remaining pills in their original packaging, plus screenshots of text messages where she and Tino discussed buying the poison online. She also handed over handwritten notes in Tino's writing that laid out the whole plan with dates and dosage amounts. The detective called us that evening and confirmed that Clara's evidence backed up everything we'd said and made the criminal case against Tino much stronger. She said Clara was clearly trying to save herself, but the evidence was still useful regardless of her motives. Lucian explained that Clara's cooperation might help her avoid jail time, but she would still face charges as an accomplice. I asked if this meant Tino would definitely be charged, and the detective said yes. The prosecutor's office was already reviewing the case file. 3 days after that, Tino's attorney called Lucian asking to discuss plea negotiations. Lucian put the call on speaker so we could hear, and the attorney sounded tired and stressed as he explained that the evidence against Tino was too strong to fight in court. He said a trial would be devastating for Tino and result in certain conviction with possible jail time. Lucian listened without saying much, and then told the attorney we would consider any reasonable offer, but Tino needed to accept full responsibility and agree to stay away from Olivia permanently. The attorney said he would talk to his client and get back to us. That same afternoon, Dex called from the trust office and said they were keeping Tino's funds paused for now, not automatically taking them away, but the pause would continue until all criminal proceedings were finished and any payback arrangements were settled. He explained this meant Tino wouldn't see any inheritance money for years at minimum, and possibly never depending on how the case went. Olivia sat next to me during the call and squeezed my hand hard when Dex said the word years. 2 weeks after the will reading, we went to our next appointment with the high-risk baby doctor. The nurse took Olivia's blood pressure 3 times because the first reading was too high, and the second one wasn't much better. The doctor came in looking concerned and checked the numbers herself before sitting down to talk to us. She said Olivia's blood pressure was up again, and that meant we needed to take stress reduction very seriously starting right now. She told Olivia to cut back her work hours to part-time maximum and to rest every afternoon lying down for at least an hour. The doctor explained that twin pregnancies were already high risk, even without family drama and legal cases, and that we needed to treat Olivia's health as the most important thing above everything else. She said high blood pressure could lead to early delivery or other problems, and that we couldn't take any chances. Olivia started crying in the exam room, and the doctor handed her tissues and said it was okay to be upset, but we needed a plan to protect the babies. We left with a list of things Olivia had to do every day, including specific foods to eat and activities to avoid, and instructions to call immediately if she felt dizzy or had headaches. In our next couples therapy session with Faye, I had to face something I'd been avoiding. Faye looked directly at me and said we needed to talk about how I'd waited over a week to tell Olivia about the poisoning instead of telling her right away on the cruise. Her voice was gentle, but firm as she explained that I'd put my own judgment about what Olivia could handle above Olivia's right to know what was happening to her own body. Olivia sat across from me with her arms crossed and said she understood I was trying to protect her, but that keeping secrets made her feel like she couldn't trust me to tell her the truth when it mattered. I felt sick hearing her say that because she was completely right. Faye made us create specific repair steps, including checking in with each other every single day about how we were feeling and promising that I would never make big decisions about Olivia's safety without talking to her first. She also said I needed to start my own individual therapy to work on my issues with being overprotective and trying to control things I couldn't control. I agreed to everything because I knew I'd messed up badly, even though my intentions were good. A month after the will reading, the prosecutor called Lucian with a formal plea deal offer for Tino. Lucian came to our house to explain it in person, and we sat at the kitchen table while he went through the details. The prosecutor was offering Tino a deal where he would plead guilty to giving someone a harmful substance on purpose and accept 3 years of probation, plus required therapy sessions, and a plan to pay back all of Olivia's medical costs and therapy bills. Lucian said Tino's attorney was pushing him hard to take the deal because going to trial would almost certainly result in jail time, given how strong the evidence was. The prosecutor wanted an answer within 2 weeks. Olivia asked what would happen if Tino refused the deal, and Lucian said then they would go to trial, and Tino would probably end up in jail for at least a year, maybe more. I asked if the probation meant Tino would be monitored, and Lucian said yes. He would have to report to a probation officer regularly and follow strict rules, including staying away from us completely. The next week, Dex asked us to come to his office to discuss the trust arrangements going forward. He sat behind his desk with a thick folder in front of him and explained that the trust would set very specific conditions for any future money going to Tino. The conditions would be tied to Tino completing his therapy requirements and making all his payback payments on time and maintaining the no-contact boundaries with Olivia. Dex said the money wasn't gone forever, but Tino would have to prove he was actually getting better and taking responsibility over a period of years before the trust would consider releasing any funds to him. He emphasized that this wasn't about punishment, but about making sure Tino demonstrated real change before getting access to that kind of money. Olivia asked how long it might take, and Dex said honestly it could be 5 years or more depending on Tino's progress and cooperation. He also said the trust would be monitoring Tino's compliance closely, and any violation of the boundaries would reset the whole timeline. When I reached my 3rd trimester of pregnancy, Olivia started having contractions at 34 weeks. We rushed to the hospital at 2 in the morning, and the doctors tried to stop the labor, but it kept progressing. The twins were born 6 hours later, weighing 4 pounds each, and they were tiny, but breathing on their own, which the doctor said was a good sign. They got moved to the NICU right away for feeding support and monitoring because babies born that early need extra help. We spent the next 2 weeks practically living at the hospital doing skin-to-skin contact and learning how to feed them through tiny tubes. It was scary watching them in their little plastic boxes with wires attached, but the nurses were amazing and patient with all our questions. The babies gained weight slowly and learned to eat better, and after 14 days, the doctor said they were stable enough to come home. We brought them back to our house with a car full of medical supplies and instructions and a follow-up appointment scheduled for the next week. While we were still doing the NICU routine, a letter arrived at our house forwarded through Tino's attorney. I opened it in the hospital parking lot before going inside and read it twice to make sure I understood what it said. Tino had written that he'd been sober for 2 months and going to therapy twice a week, and he wanted to say he knew he'd hurt Olivia badly and destroyed her trust. The letter didn't ask for forgiveness or request contact. It just said he understood what he'd done was terrible, and he was working on becoming a better person. I brought the letter inside and showed it to Olivia while she was holding one of the babies against her chest. She read it once very slowly, then folded it up and put it in her bag without saying anything for a long time. Finally, she said maybe someday she would be ready to respond to him, but today wasn't that day, and she didn't know when that day would come. After the babies came home, we had another session with Faye to work out the final contact boundaries for our family. Faye helped us write down exactly what we were comfortable with and what we absolutely were not okay with. We decided that Tino's parents could visit the babies at our house, but only with us present the whole time, and only after calling ahead to schedule it. Tino himself would have zero contact until he finished his full probation period, and both Olivia and I agreed we were ready, which might be years from now, or might be never. Faye said the boundaries felt protective rather than mean, and that they gave everyone space to heal without forcing relationships that weren't ready. She reminded us that boundaries could change over time as situations changed, but for now, these rules would keep our family safe while letting Tino's parents still be grandparents in a limited way. 3 months later, an envelope arrived from Dex's office with the trust's official letterhead, and I opened it at our kitchen table while the twins napped in their nursery. The notification explained that Tino remained under a monitored rehabilitation plan with no current access to any funds, and the trust would review his progress annually for at least the next 5 years. Our family received a modest grant for medical expenses and childcare support, totaling $12,000, which would help with the NICU bills and ongoing pediatric appointments. I read the letter twice and felt grateful, but not dependent because we'd already set up our own savings plan and knew we could handle things without waiting for inheritance money to fix our problems. Olivia came into the kitchen holding our daughter, who'd just woken up fussy, and I showed her the letter while our son started crying from the other room. She scanned it quickly and nodded before handing me the baby so she could go get our son, and we didn't really discuss it much because we'd already moved past needing that money to feel secure. The twins kept us busy every single day with feeding schedules and diaper changes and doctor visits, and we fell into bed exhausted most nights without energy left to think about Tino or the trust or anything beyond getting through the next day. Now I'm sitting in our living room at midnight with both twins finally asleep in their bassinets after an hour of rocking and shushing, and Olivia's curled up next to me on the couch looking completely worn out, but genuinely calm for the first time in months. We didn't get some perfect ending where everything worked out exactly right, or where Tino got exactly what he deserved, or where all of Olivia's trauma just disappeared. What we got instead was boundaries that actually work for our family, 2 healthy babies who are growing despite being born early, and the knowledge that when it really mattered, I protected them the best way I knew how. Olivia's hand rests on my arm, and she's half asleep but smiling slightly, and I know we're going to be okay, even though okay doesn't mean perfect or easy or completely healed from everything that happened.
My boyfriend's sister somehow knew exactly what I was doing while I was doing it, so I used her own knowledge to destroy her. Me and my boyfriend were about to have intimacy for the first time when we heard a knock at the door. I peered from across the hall and saw it was his sister. "Oh, sorry if I interrupted anything. It's just so cozy here with the lighting like this." She glanced at the dimmed lights and the vanilla candle I'd just lit. "Perfect for Monopoly. Unless you and Apple were in the middle of something, Bunny." She called her brother that, and my blood went cold. Bunny was the name I called Noah when we were alone, never in front of anyone. Before either of us could say anything, she shoved past us and started setting up the game in the living room. I tried to be nice since Noah always said Danielle was going through a rough time, but my mind was racing. How could she possibly know that nickname? But then halfway through, while Noah was in the bathroom, she casually mentioned how much she loved the show. Love is Blind. My heart went cold. That show was my guilty pleasure, one that I only watched on my laptop while Noah was at work. The episode where the mom finds out about the affair? Do you know it? My stomach twisted because I'd literally just watched that episode. But how did she even know I watched that show? I only streamed it on my laptop with headphones. The next day I got my period. No one but Noah knew about it. I hadn't even called out of work yet. So when Danielle texted me the next morning and exclaimed, "Had the strangest dream about you bleeding last night. Hope you're okay." My hands literally went cold holding my phone. The timing was too perfect. I tried to bring it up to Noah that evening, keeping my voice light like I was just curious. But immediately his whole body changed like I'd never seen before. Jaw tight, shoulders stiff. "She's always had a hard time making friends. I'm all she has. And you're my first serious girlfriend. So this is really hard on her." His voice cracked a little on that last part. So I tried. I really freaking tried. I invited her to our movie nights, our Sunday brunches, everything. But then this pattern started that I couldn't ignore. Every single romantic dinner we planned, and I mean everyone, Danielle would suddenly get devastating stomach cramps exactly 30 minutes before our reservation. Noah would have to rush over with medicine and heating pads. The worst part was how stubborn Noah was on rationalizing everything. "She used to be my +1 for everything," he'd say, like that explained how she seemed to know every detail of our lives. Meanwhile, her behavior was escalating in ways that made my skin crawl. I posted our anniversary photo, just a simple selfie of us at dinner, and within an hour she'd posted a whole carousel of childhood pictures. Her and Noah in the bathtub as toddlers. The two of them slow dancing at some middle school formal, her head on his chest. She posted those within an hour, like she was watching my Instagram in real time. The caption made me want to throw up. "No one will ever know you like your day one." After that post, I needed distance from her, which is why I pushed so hard for the Costa Rica trip. We'd been saving for 6 months, taking overtime shifts and skipping takeout. Our flights were booked, hotels paid for, everything perfect. Until 2 days before leaving, when my phone lit up with Noah calling from his car. I could hear Danielle hyperventilating in the background. "She says she can't live without me for a whole week," he said, and I already knew what was coming. "She's having a panic attack, April. A real one. I've never seen her like this." We canceled the trip, lost 75% of our money, 2 days before our flight, the exact window to lose the most money. That night she posted a photo of us, except I was cropped out, with the caption, "Nothing better than sibling time." When I showed him, Noah looked genuinely torn and said, "I love you so much, but she's fragile and I'm scared of what she'll do." So I kept it together for Noah, until the day I was sitting on the toilet and decided to play Candy Crush. I hadn't played in months, and I'd last made it to level 367, but when the game loaded, my heart dropped. I was suddenly on level 950. An awful gut feeling washed over me. And after doing some digging, I found an app I didn't recognize buried in my accessibility settings. Family Safety Monitor. I Googled it with my laptop. It was black market spyware that mirrors everything. Texts, photos, searches, even deleted content. And it can see through your camera. And guess when it was installed? 4 months ago. Right after Danielle helped me fix my phone when it was acting weird that one time. I sat there for an hour, half dissociating, half deciding what to do. The obvious answer was to call the cops, but I'm Mexican with no proof that this was her. She'd cry about being worried, wanting to be close, and they'd call it family drama. That's when the idea hit me. If she was watching everything on my phone, I could use that against her. I scheduled a fake appointment at Planned Parenthood and texted my mom, "Noah doesn't know yet, but I'm pregnant. I'm going to abort this." 15 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. It was Danielle. "Isn't there something Noah should know?" I stand there with my hand still on the doorknob, keeping my face completely blank even though my heart is racing. So fast I can feel it in my throat. Danielle's eyes are locked on mine, searching for any crack in my expression, any sign that I know what she's talking about. I can see her getting more confused by the second, because I'm not reacting the way she expected. I take a slow breath and tell her that Noah and I are doing great, and there's nothing we need to discuss right now. She opens her mouth to say something else, but I'm already stepping back and closing the door, not slamming it but firm enough that she knows the conversation is over. The second I hear the lock click into place, I'm pulling out my phone with shaking hands and opening the clock app to check the exact time. 8:47 p.m. I take a screenshot of it, then I go to my messages and screenshot the fake text I sent to my mom. 15 minutes. She showed up exactly 15 minutes after I sent that text, which means she saw it in real time and immediately drove over here. I save both screenshots to a new folder on my phone that I label Evidence, and my hands are still trembling, but now it's from this weird mix of fear and something else. Anger, maybe. Or just this cold determination settling into my bones. I open my messages again and type out the word pineapple to my mom, our agreed-upon safe word that means everything I say from now on might be fake. The 3 dots appear almost immediately, and then her response pops up with a heart emoji. And the words, "I didn't tell anyone, sweetie." Reading that makes my eyes sting because my mom is the one person in all of this that Danielle can't touch or manipulate or use against me. I sit down on the couch and just breathe for a minute, trying to process what just happened and what it means. She's been watching everything on my phone for months, seeing every text and photo and search, and now I finally have proof that she's using that information. But I can't tell Noah yet because he'll just find some way to explain it away like he always does. I need more evidence, something so clear that even his protective instincts can't rationalize it. Noah comes home a little after 10 p.m. and I can hear how tired he is from the way he drops his keys on the counter and sighs. He walks into the living room and I watch his face carefully as he asks if Danielle stopped by earlier because she sent him some weird text about needing to talk to me. His first reaction isn't suspicion or concern about why she would show up unannounced. It's this automatic need to defend her and find an explanation. I can see it in the way his shoulders tense up and how he won't quite meet my eyes. I tell him, yeah, she stopped by, but it was nothing important. Just wanted to say hi. He looks like he wants to ask more questions, but he's too exhausted to push it. So he just nods and heads to the bathroom to shower. I sit there on the couch and make a decision right then. I'm not going to say anything to him about the spyware or my suspicions until I have evidence. So solid that even his need to protect his sister can't explain it away. I need to be smart about this, methodical, because if I accuse her without proof, then I'm the bad guy who's attacking his fragile sister. The next morning, I wake up before my alarm and can't fall back asleep, because my brain is already racing with everything I need to do. Noah leaves for his early shift around 6:30 a.m., and the second the door closes behind him, I'm up and making coffee. I sit down at our kitchen table with my laptop and start researching the Family Safety Monitor app, taking screenshots of every single thing I find. The permissions list makes my stomach turn, because it shows exactly what the app can do. It can see through my camera, read my deleted messages, track my location in real time, mirror everything to another device. I screenshot the install date that shows 4 months ago, right after Danielle helped me fix my phone when it was acting weird. I create a document and start organizing everything by date, writing notes about what each piece of evidence proves. The more I read about what this spyware can do, the more violated I feel, like she's been standing in my bedroom watching me for months. But I can't let myself fall apart right now. I channel all that sick feeling into cold determination and keep taking screenshots, keep building my case. During my lunch break at work, I find Vikram in the break room and ask if he can look at my phone privately. My hands are shaking a little when I say it, because asking for help makes this whole thing feel more real. Vikram has been my work friend for 2 years, and I trust him completely. But admitting out loud that someone has been spying on me is terrifying in a way I didn't expect. He can see something is seriously wrong from my face and he immediately says yes, of course he'll help. We go to an empty conference room and I pull up the accessibility settings to show him the app. I watch his expression change as he scrolls through the permissions, his eyebrows pulling together and his mouth getting tight. He looks up at me and says this is definitely spyware and it's mirroring everything to another device in real time. Then he tells me something I didn't expect. He says I need to keep the phone exactly as it is for now, because if I delete the app or change any settings, I could destroy the chain of evidence I'll need if this goes legal. Legal. The word makes my chest feel tight because I hadn't really let myself think that far ahead yet. After work, I stop at a convenience store 3 blocks from my apartment and buy the cheapest prepaid phone they have. I pay with cash and give a fake name when I activate it, feeling like I'm in some kind of spy movie, except this is my actual life. The burner phone is this cheap plastic thing that feels like a toy in my hand, but having it in my purse makes me feel like I'm finally taking back some small piece of control over my own privacy. Danielle can watch my regular phone all she wants now because I have a way to communicate that she can't see. I program in my mom's number and Vikram's number, and that's it. Nobody else needs to know about this phone yet. That evening, I'm sitting on the couch with my compromised phone and I create a fake calendar event for tomorrow afternoon at 2 p.m. I title it Therapy Intake Appointment and add it to a made-up address for a women's health center. In the notes section, I write, discussing relationship anxiety and communication issues with Noah, to make it look completely real and personal. Then I just sit there and wait to see what happens, my heart beating hard in my chest. I'm testing her again, seeing if she'll take the bait, and part of me is hoping she won't because that would mean I'm wrong about all of this. But another part of me, the part that's been feeling crazy and paranoid for months, needs to know for sure. I sit there staring at my phone, waiting to see what happens next. 23 minutes pass and I'm checking Instagram every few seconds, my thumb sliding over the screen again and again. Then Danielle's profile picture appears at the top of my story feed with that little colored ring around it. My stomach drops. I tap it and there's a quote post with a thinking face emoji. The text says something about how some people hide their problems instead of facing them. My hands go cold holding my phone because there's no way, absolutely no way she could know about that therapy appointment, unless she's watching my phone right this second. The appointment isn't real, but she doesn't know that, and she just proved everything I suspected. I screenshot her story immediately, making sure the timestamp shows in the corner. Then I open my photos and scroll through everything I need to save. The spyware permission screen gets screenshotted first, then the install date showing 4 months ago. I go back to Instagram and screenshot Danielle's story again with my calendar app open in the background, so you can see both timestamps side by side. My hands are shaking, but I keep going, saving every piece of proof I can find. I spend the next hour on my laptop creating a folder called Evidence and dragging everything into it. Each screenshot gets renamed with the date and a note about what it proves. The spyware install date goes in first, then the fake calendar event I created, then Danielle's Instagram story posted exactly 23 minutes later. I add a text document with notes about the timing and what each piece of evidence shows. Looking at it all laid out like this makes the pattern impossible to ignore. The next morning, I'm sitting at my kitchen table with my laptop open, searching for privacy rights websites. I find a legal aid hotline number and my finger hovers over the call button for a full minute before I actually press it. The intake person who answers sounds tired but kind, and I tell her the whole story from the beginning. About the spyware, about Danielle knowing things she shouldn't know, about the fake pregnancy text and her showing up 15 minutes later. The woman listens without interrupting, And when I finish, she gives me a direct number for someone named Lena, who works as a privacy advocate. She says Lena deals with exactly this kind of digital harassment. Just hearing that there's a name for what's happening to me, that there are people who specialize in this, makes me feel less alone. I thank her and hang up. Then I stare at Lena's number for another few minutes before I save it in my contacts. 2 hours later, my phone rings with a number I don't recognize. I answer, and a calm voice says she's Lena, and she got my information from the legal aid hotline. We talk for 30 minutes about everything I've documented so far. She asks specific questions about the timing of each incident and what evidence I have for each one. When I tell her about my organized evidence folder, she sounds impressed. Then she tells me something that makes complete sense, but I hadn't thought of yet. She says I need to keep building evidence before I make any accusations, because people like Danielle often have explanations ready for everything. She says I need to make the pattern so clear that nobody can rationalize it away, not even Noah. Following Lena's advice, I open the Notes app on my compromised phone that same afternoon. I type out this whole fake confession about feeling guilty for lying to Noah about wanting kids someday. I make it sound really personal and raw, like something I'd write in a private journal that I never wanted anyone to see. I write about how I told him I wanted a family, but I'm not sure if that's true anymore. I write about feeling trapped and scared to tell him the truth. Then I save it and close the app, my heart beating fast. That evening, Noah is watching TV in the living room and his phone buzzes on the coffee table. He picks it up and his face changes as he reads something. He looks over at me with this confused expression and holds out his phone. It's a text from Danielle saying she's worried about me and thinks he should check on what I really want for the future. The exact phrasing from my fake note. Noah asks me if everything's okay and if there's something I want to talk about. I force my face to stay neutral and tell him I don't know what Danielle is talking about. Everything's fine between us. While he's looking at me, I screenshot the text conversation over his shoulder, making sure to capture Danielle's message with the timestamp. Later that night, I add it to my evidence folder with a note about how she used almost the exact words from my private note. I try to bring it up with Noah the next morning while we're having coffee. I ask him if he thinks it's weird that Danielle texted him about my future plans right after I was thinking about that stuff. He immediately gets this defensive look on his face and his shoulders tense up. He says Danielle probably just sensed something was off because siblings have that kind of connection, that twin thing where they know what the other person is feeling. I want to scream at him that she's not psychic. She's watching my phone, but instead I just nod and say, okay. After he leaves for work, I open my evidence folder and add a new entry with the date and time, recording exactly what he said about the sibling connection. Watching him rationalize this away when the proof is right in front of him makes me feel so frustrated I could cry. But crying won't help. Building an undeniable case will help. The next morning, I meet Lena in person at a coffee shop downtown. She's in her 40s with gray streaks in her dark hair, and she has this calm energy that makes me feel safe. We sit in a corner booth and she pulls out a printed checklist. She walks me through everything I need to do next. Preserve all evidence and make backup copies. File a non-emergency police report to create an official record. Consider sending a formal no-contact letter to establish clear boundaries. She's so professional and matter-of-fact about it all. Like what's happening to me is serious enough to warrant these steps, but also something that can be handled. She doesn't make me feel crazy or paranoid. She makes me feel like I'm doing exactly the right thing by documenting everything carefully. For my next test, I open Photoshop on my laptop and create a fake screenshot of a dinner reservation confirmation. I make it look completely real with a confirmation number and everything. The restaurant is this fancy place downtown, and the reservation is for this Friday at 7 p.m. I save the fake screenshot to my phone's photo library, and then add it to my calendar with a note that says anniversary celebration. I even set a reminder for an hour before. Then I wait to see what happens. Friday comes and I'm watching the clock all afternoon. At 6:28 p.m., exactly 32 minutes before our fake reservation time, Noah's phone buzzes. He looks at it and his face falls. He shows me a text from Danielle about having severe stomach cramps and needing him to bring heating pads and medicine right away. The timing is so perfect, so precise, that I actually laugh out loud. It's this bitter sound that comes out of my throat before I can stop it. Noah looks at me confused and asks what's funny. I tell him nothing. It's just the same thing that always happens. He asks what I mean and I say nothing. Never mind. He should go help his sister. While he's grabbing his keys, I screenshot Danielle's text message, my fake reservation confirmation with all the metadata showing when I created the file and my calendar entry. I save everything in my evidence folder with a note that says, pattern number 4, medical emergency time to dinner reservation. She's basically proving my case for me at this point and she doesn't even know it. I grab my phone while Noah is still pulling on his jacket and rushing around looking for his keys. My fingers move fast, taking screenshot after screenshot. The text from Danielle with the timestamp showing 6:28 p.m., the fake reservation confirmation I made in Photoshop with all the file creation metadata visible, the calendar entry I added just this morning. I open my evidence folder and create a new note, typing quickly. Pattern number 4, medical emergency timed exactly to dinner reservation. Fake reservation created this morning to test surveillance. I save everything and close my phone just as Noah kisses my forehead and tells me he'll be back in an hour. The door clicks shut behind him, and I sit there on the couch feeling this weird mix of satisfaction and sadness. She took the bait again. Perfectly timed, exactly like I knew she would. The next morning, I wake up early and make myself coffee. sitting at the kitchen table and staring at my phone. I need to ask Aaron about the security footage, but my stomach is in knots about it. He's a nice guy, mid-50s with gray hair, and he's always been really respectful about tenant privacy. I'm scared he'll say no or think I'm being paranoid. But I force myself to walk downstairs to his office around 9 a.m. when I know he's usually doing paperwork. I knock on his door and he looks up from his computer with a friendly smile. I ask if I can talk to him about something kind of serious, and he gestures for me to sit down. My voice shakes a little as I explain that I'm documenting a harassment situation, and I need the hallway camera footage from last Tuesday night around 8:45 p.m. Aaron's face gets more serious and he asks if everything is okay, if I'm safe. I tell him I am, that I'm just building documentation in case I need to file a police report. He's quiet for a minute, thinking, and then he nods slowly. He says he can pull the footage, but he needs me to sign a form requesting it for legal purposes, and I agree immediately. That afternoon, around 3 p.m., I get an email from Aaron with 3 video files attached. My hands are literally shaking as I click the first one open. The footage is grainy black and white, but clear enough. It shows our apartment door and part of the hallway. I can see the timestamp in the corner, 8:35 p.m. Then at 8:39 p.m., Danielle appears in the frame. She's pacing back and forth in front of our door, checking her phone every few seconds. In the second video clip, she keeps pacing and checking her phone, looking agitated. The third clip shows her finally knocking on our door at 8:47 p.m., exactly 12 minutes after I sent that fake text to my mom. I save all 3 videos to my evidence folder and add detailed notes about the timing. This is concrete proof that she saw my text message in real time and rushed over immediately. I spend the next hour organizing everything in my laptop folder, making sure all the timestamps line up, making sure I have notes explaining what each piece of evidence shows. Then I take a deep breath and drive to the police station. My heart is pounding as I walk through the doors and approach the front desk. I ask if I can speak to someone about harassment and stalking, trying to keep my voice steady and calm. The officer at the desk asks me to wait, and a few minutes later, a woman in her 30s with dark hair pulled back comes out to meet me. She introduces herself as Officer Kenzie Jones and leads me to a small interview room. I sit down across from her and pull out my laptop, opening my evidence folder. Kenzie listens carefully as I walk her through everything: the spyware installation, the pattern of Danielle knowing things she shouldn't know, the tests I've run, the video footage. She takes notes the whole time and looks through each piece of documentation I show her. When I finish, she leans back in her chair and tells me that what I have definitely shows a clear pattern of surveillance and harassment. But then she explains that I need to establish formal boundaries first, before they can take stronger legal action. I feel my heart sink a little because I was hoping this would be enough for immediate help. Kenzie must see my face fall because she quickly adds that filing a report today creates an official record, which is really important. She explains that I should file a formal incident report right now, and then send Danielle a certified letter documenting my boundaries clearly. She says that if Danielle violates those boundaries after being formally told to stop, then we would have grounds for a restraining order. The legal process suddenly feels more real and more possible than it did before. I spend the next hour filling out forms and giving my statement to Kenzie. She's really professional and takes everything seriously, which makes me feel less crazy about all the documentation I've been doing. When I finally leave the station, I feel exhausted, but also weirdly empowered. That evening, I decide to run one more test before I confront Noah with everything. I open my streaming service app on the compromised phone and change my password. Then I search for a show called The Affair and add it to my watch list. I mark several episodes as watched, making it look like I've been binge-watching this show about cheating. I'm getting almost methodical about these tests now, each one building a stronger case that even Noah can't explain away with his excuses about sibling intuition. I set my phone down and start making dinner, checking the time. 8 minutes later, my phone buzzes with an Instagram notification. Danielle has posted a meme about people who watch shows about cheating because they're guilty themselves, with a bunch of side-eye emojis and laughing faces. The speed of her response is almost impressive in how obvious it is. I screenshot her post with the timestamp showing and add it to my evidence folder, noting that it came exactly 8 minutes after I added the show to my watch list. The next day during my lunch break, I meet Vikram at a coffee shop near our office. He's already ordered us both sandwiches, and he looks concerned when I sit down. I show him all my evidence and explain what the police said about needing documentation. Vikram immediately offers to help me create a simple technical document that explains what the spyware does in plain language that anyone can understand. We spend his whole lunch break working on it together on his laptop. He includes screenshots of the spyware permissions, diagrams showing how the screen mirroring works, and a clear timeline of when it was installed compared to when Danielle helped fix my phone. Having this technical validation from someone else, someone who actually understands this stuff, makes everything feel more real and more serious. After work that day, I meet with Lena at her office. She's reviewed all my documentation, and she helps me draft a no-contact letter to Danielle. We make it completely factual and unemotional, just listing specific incidents with dates and times and stating clearly that I want no further contact of any kind. Reading it over when we're done, I feel this strange mix of emotions. I'm proud of myself for standing up and setting boundaries, but I'm also sad that it's come to this with my boyfriend's sister. I never wanted to be the girlfriend who caused problems in his family. That evening when Noah gets home from work, I ask him if he'll go to couples counseling with me. I keep my voice as calm and reasonable as possible, trying not to sound accusatory or upset. I tell him that I love him so much, but I'm really struggling with how close he is to Danielle, and I think having a neutral third party could help us communicate better about boundaries. Noah's whole body goes stiff, and he pulls back from me on the couch, shaking his head before I even finish talking. His jaw tightens, and he starts saying how Danielle is going through such a hard time right now, and he can't just abandon her when she needs him most. I take a deep breath, and my hands are shaking, but I look him straight in the eyes and tell him that I need him to choose counseling with me, or I need to take some space from our relationship. My voice cracks a little on the word space, but I don't look away, and I don't take it back. Noah stares at me for a long moment, and I can see him fighting with himself, wanting to argue or explain or defend Danielle like he always does. But something in my face must tell him I'm serious this time because he just nods slowly and says, "Okay, he'll think about it." I go to bed that night feeling sick to my stomach because thinking about it isn't the same as agreeing, but at least I said what I needed to say. The next morning, I wake up before Noah and grab my old compromised phone from where I've been keeping it in my nightstand. I open my email app and start typing a new message to myself with the subject line, "Police Evidence Danielle" in all caps. I don't write anything in the body of the email, just save it as a draft without sending it. My heart is pounding because I know she's probably watching right now, seeing this draft appear on her mirrored screen, and I wonder if she'll panic enough to show up again. I set the phone down on the kitchen counter and start making coffee, trying to act normal even though I feel like I'm setting a trap that might actually work this time. I get to work around 9 and settle into my usual morning routine of checking emails and updating spreadsheets. Around 11, my desk phone rings, and it's the security guard downstairs saying there's someone here asking for me urgently, claiming it's a family emergency. My stomach drops because I know exactly who it is before he even says her name. I take the elevator down to the lobby, and there's Danielle standing by the front desk with tears streaming down her face, mascara smudged under her eyes. She looks desperate and angry at the same time, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. The security guard, an older guy with gray hair whose name tag says Arkin, looks uncomfortable standing between us. I walk up slowly and keep my face as blank as possible, even though my heart is racing so hard I can feel it in my throat. Danielle starts to move toward me, but I hold up my hand and tell her very clearly that I don't want to talk to her privately. My voice comes out steadier than I expected, and I say that if she has something to say, she can say it right here in the lobby with witnesses. She starts crying harder and reaches for my arm, but I step back and Arkin moves slightly closer to her. She's saying something about how I'm trying to turn Noah against her and how she just wants to talk, but her voice is getting louder and people walking through the lobby are starting to stare. Arkin asks her politely to leave, and when she doesn't move, he tells her more firmly that she needs to exit the building now. I make sure to look at his name tag again and check the time on my phone, taking a mental note that it's 11:14 on a Tuesday morning. Danielle finally turns and walks toward the doors, but she looks back at me with this expression that's half hurt and half threatening, and I feel cold all over, but I don't let it show on my face. I go straight back upstairs and grab my purse and tell my supervisor I need to leave for a personal emergency. I drive to the police station with my hands gripping the steering wheel too tight and walk inside asking for Officer Kenzie. She comes out to meet me in the waiting area, and we go back to a small room with a table and 2 chairs. I tell her everything about Danielle showing up at my workplace, about the draft email I created this morning, about how she showed up just 2 hours after I saved it. Kenzie writes it all down and adds it to my incident report, and then she looks up at me and says, "The pattern is definitely strong enough now to move forward with formal documentation." Hearing a police officer actually validate what I've been experiencing makes something loosen in my chest, and I realize I've been holding my breath waiting for someone in authority to tell me I'm not crazy or overreacting. Kenzie explains that the next step is sending Danielle a formal no-contact letter, so there's official documentation of my boundaries, and if she violates those boundaries after being formally notified, then we have grounds for a restraining order. I drive home feeling shaky but also weirdly calm, like I'm finally doing something real instead of just collecting evidence in secret. That evening, I sit at our kitchen table with my laptop and pull up the no-contact letter that Lena helped me draft last week. I read through it one more time, checking that all the dates and times are correct, that the language is clear and factual without being emotional. I print it out on our printer and sign it at the bottom with my full legal name. Then I fold it carefully and put it in an envelope, writing Danielle's address on the front in neat block letters. I grab my keys and drive to the post office before it closes at 6, getting there with about 15 minutes to spare. The postal worker behind the counter is a middle-aged woman with glasses, and she explains how certified mail with return receipt works. She tells me that Danielle will have to sign for the letter when it's delivered, and I'll get a receipt back as proof that she received it. I pay the extra fees and watch her stamp the envelope and scan it into the system. When she hands me the tracking number receipt, I fold it up and put it in my wallet. And holding that little piece of paper makes me feel like I'm finally doing something concrete to protect myself, instead of just reacting to whatever Danielle does next. The tracking website shows the letter was delivered 2 days later on Thursday morning at 10:32. I check my phone obsessively all day waiting to see what Danielle will do. If she'll text Noah or show up somewhere or post something weird online. Friday morning, I'm drinking coffee and scrolling Instagram when I notice something strange. My notifications show that Danielle has liked about 30 of my old posts from 2 and 3 years ago, all within a 10-minute window between 7:15 and 7:25. I click through to see which posts, and they're completely random. Pictures from college and family vacations and random selfies. Nothing recent or relevant. It's such obvious retaliation that I actually laugh out loud, this bitter sound that surprises me. But instead of getting upset, I just start screenshotting her activity, making sure the timestamps are visible in each image. I add them all to my evidence folder on my laptop with a note that says, "Retaliation via social media, 1 day after no contact letter delivery." I text Vikram that same afternoon and ask if he has time to help me set up a completely new phone and laptop. He says he can come over Sunday morning and brings his own laptop bag full of cables and external drives. We sit at my kitchen table for 3 hours while he transfers only the files and contacts I actually need to the new devices, leaving the old compromised phone completely untouched. He explains that he's making a complete forensic clone of the old phone's data and storing it on an encrypted external drive, preserving everything exactly as it is in case I need it for legal stuff later. Watching him work is calming somehow. Seeing someone who knows what they're doing take this seriously and treat it like the violation it actually is. When he's done, he puts the old phone in a plastic bag and labels it with the date and his initials, telling me to keep it somewhere safe and dry. The new phone feels weird in my hand, lighter somehow, and I realize it's because I'm not carrying around the weight of knowing someone is watching everything I do anymore. Over the next few days, I start noticing something new and it makes my skin crawl. 2 of Noah's friends, guys he's known since high school, send me messages out of nowhere asking if everything is okay. One of them, Jake, says he heard I've been going through some stuff and wants to make sure I'm all right. The other one, Arkin, asks if Noah and I are having problems because someone mentioned I've been acting secretive lately. I screenshot both conversations and then check Danielle's Instagram to see if she's posted anything, but her account has gone completely quiet since the letter was delivered. That's when I realize she's moved to a different strategy now that her direct access to my phone is gone. She's trying to poison Noah's social circle against me, sending private messages with vague hints that make me sound untrustworthy or unstable. I respond to both guys saying everything is fine and thanks for checking in, keeping my messages short and normal. But inside, I'm furious because this is exactly the kind of thing that's hard to prove or document, just careful manipulation that makes me look paranoid if I try to explain it. I spend an entire evening at my laptop creating a clean, organized PDF document that shows everything in one place. I start with a title page that just says evidence of surveillance and harassment with the date range. Then I create a timeline that shows each piece of bait I planted on the left side, with the exact date and time and Danielle's response on the right side with timestamps and screenshots. The fake pregnancy text and her arrival 15 minutes later with video footage from the hallway camera. The fake therapy appointment in my calendar and her Instagram story 23 minutes later. The fake dinner reservation and her text to Noah about stomach cramps exactly 30 minutes before. The draft email about police evidence and her showing up at my office 2 hours later. Every single trap laid out in order with the proof right next to it. Then I add a section with Vikram's technical document explaining what the spyware does and when it was installed. Another section with the security footage and police reports. A final section with screenshots of her retaliatory behavior after the no-contact letter. When I'm done, the PDF is 42 pages long, and laying it all out like this makes the pattern impossible to deny. She's been watching my phone in real time for months, and I have proof of it that even Noah can't explain away with his excuses about sibling intuition or coincidence. I save the file with a password and email it to myself at 3 different email addresses, just to make sure I don't lose it. Then I sit back and look at the document on my screen and feel this weird mix of pride and sadness. Proud that I stood up for myself and documented everything so carefully, but sad that it had to come to this with my boyfriend's sister in the first place. I print out the certified mail receipt and hold it in my hand while I walk to the living room where Noah is watching TV. My stomach feels tight, but I keep my voice steady when I tell him we need to talk about counseling again, and I can see his shoulders go tense before I even finish the sentence. He starts to say something about how Danielle needs him right now, but I hold up the receipt and tell him this is my boundary. Counseling, or I need space from this relationship. The words come out firmer than I expected, and I watch his face change as he realizes I'm serious this time. He looks at the receipt for a long moment, his jaw working like he's trying to find the right words, and when he finally nods, his whole body looks tired in a way I've never seen before. He agrees to 1 session, just 1, and I can see in his eyes that part of him knows something is really wrong, but he's still too scared to face what that might mean about his sister. The next morning, I call Lena from my new phone and ask if she can do a conference call with Officer Kenzie to coordinate how I should present my evidence at the counseling session. Lena picks up on the second ring and immediately agrees, saying she'll loop Kenzie in within the hour. When the 3 of us are on the line together, I explain that Noah finally agreed to counseling, and I want to show him the evidence there with a neutral witness present. Kenzie asks if I'm worried about my safety, and I tell her no. I'm more worried about compromising any potential legal case if I present things wrong. Lena jumps in and says that having a therapist witness Noah's reaction to the evidence could actually strengthen my documentation of the pattern, showing that I tried to address this through proper channels before escalating further. They both walk me through exactly what to bring, how to present it calmly, and what to do if Noah gets defensive or tries to leave. By the time we hang up, I feel like I have a game plan instead of just panic. That afternoon, I pull out the old cloned phone that still has the spyware running, and I create one final test. I open a flight booking website and take a screenshot of a fake confirmation for a solo trip to visit my college roommate Ava next month, making sure the dates and flight numbers look completely real. I save the screenshot to my photos and add the trip to my calendar with notes about packing and what to bring Ava as a gift. Then I set the phone down on my kitchen counter and go make myself lunch. forcing myself to act normal even though my heart is racing. I check my watch every few minutes, counting down, waiting to see if Danielle will take the bait one more time. 18 minutes later, Noah's phone starts buzzing on the coffee table where he left it. I walk over and see his screen lighting up with message after message from Danielle, the notifications piling up so fast he can't possibly read them all. He picks up his phone looking confused and starts scrolling through, his eyebrows pulling together as he reads. She's sending him this flood of texts about how she can't handle him abandoning her, how she thought they were closer than this, how a whole week away is too much for her to bear right now. Noah looks up at me with this completely lost expression and asks if I'm planning a trip somewhere, because Danielle seems to think I'm leaving for a whole week. My fake booking was for 6 days, not 7, and I watch him stare at his phone trying to figure out how his sister could possibly know about a trip we never discussed. I tell him calmly that I was thinking about visiting Ava, but hadn't mentioned it to anyone yet, and I can see the gears turning in his head as he tries to make sense of the timing. 3 days later, we drive to the counseling office in separate cars because Noah has to go straight to work after. The building is this old converted house with a waiting room that smells like lavender, and I sit there with my folder of evidence on my lap, feeling like I might throw up. When the door opens, Joyce walks out and introduces herself, this calm woman in her 50s with gray hair and kind eyes. She leads us into her office and gestures to a couch, explaining that her job is to help us communicate more effectively, not to take sides. The room is small and comfortable with soft lighting and plants on the windowsill, and I feel this weird mix of nervousness and relief that we're finally here with someone neutral who can witness what I'm about to show Noah. Joyce asks us what brought us to counseling today, looking between us with this patient expression. I take a breath and pull out my printed timeline, the pages slightly crumpled from how tightly I've been gripping them. My hands are shaking just a little as I hand the document to Noah, and I explain as calmly as I can that I discovered spyware on my phone, and I've been documenting the pattern for the past 2 weeks. Noah takes the papers looking skeptical, and I watch his face as he starts reading the first page where Vikram laid out the technical explanation of what Family Safety Monitor does. His eyes move across the lines, and I can see his certainty starting to waver as he reads about camera access, deleted message recovery, real-time location tracking. Noah looks up at me with this expression that's half confused and half defensive, and he asks how Danielle could possibly know all these things, if it wasn't just coincidence or sibling intuition. His voice has that same protective edge it always gets when I bring up his sister. I don't say anything, just pull out my laptop and open the security camera footage that Aaron gave me. I angle the screen so both Noah and Joyce can see it clearly, and I play the clip of Danielle pacing outside our apartment door, checking her phone over and over. I point to the timestamp in the corner showing 8:32 p.m. Then I pull up the screenshot of my fake pregnancy text to my mom stamped at 8:17 p.m. 15 minutes. Noah watches the video play, and I can see the exact moment when his certainty starts to crack, his mouth opening slightly like he wants to argue but can't find the words. Joyce leans forward slightly and starts talking in this gentle but firm voice about the difference between supporting someone and enabling harmful behavior. She explains what healthy boundaries with family members look like, using words like enmeshment and codependency that I've read about online but never heard said out loud in relation to Noah and Danielle. I watch Noah struggling with this, his whole body tense, and I can tell his identity as Danielle's protector is being challenged in a way that makes him deeply uncomfortable. But he's listening, really listening, in a way he never has before when I've tried to talk about this. His eyes stay on Joyce and he nods occasionally, and I feel this tiny spark of something that might be hope. Right in the middle of Joyce's explanation about what enmeshment means, Noah's phone starts ringing in his pocket. He pulls it out and I see Danielle's name on the screen, and before he can answer, Joyce asks him gently if he can silence it and stay present in the session. The phone keeps ringing and Noah stares at it, his thumb hovering over the answer button. Then it stops and immediately starts ringing again. And again. 5 calls in a row, each one going to voicemail before the next one starts. Joyce repeats her request, her voice still calm but with a little more firmness, and I hold my breath waiting to see what Noah will do. He looks at the phone one more time, then hits the side button to silence it and puts it face down on the couch next to him. It keeps buzzing silently, but he doesn't pick it up, and I feel this wave of relief so strong it makes my eyes sting. After the session ends, we walk out to the parking lot in silence, both of us processing everything that just happened. Noah gets in his car but doesn't start it right away, just sits there staring at his steering wheel. I pull out the old cloned phone and open my messages, and I show Noah what I'm doing as I type a very specific phrase to myself, thinking about getting a dog next spring. I send it and show him the timestamp. Then I put the phone away and tell him to wait 20 minutes. We sit in our separate cars and I watch the clock on my dashboard tick forward, my heart beating hard in my chest. At exactly 19 minutes, Noah's phone lights up and he holds it up to show me through his windshield. Danielle has posted an Instagram story with a picture of a puppy, the caption reading, "Some people aren't ready for that kind of commitment," with 3 thinking face emojis. Noah just stares at his phone and doesn't say anything, but I can see from here that his hands are shaking. I turn to face him in the passenger seat and my whole body feels like it's vibrating with nervous energy. The words come out shaky but clear. "I need you to stop all contact with Danielle for 30 days while we work on us, or I'm moving out." Noah's head snaps toward me and I can see panic spreading across his face. His mouth opens but nothing comes out at first. I watch his hands grip the steering wheel even though the car isn't running. his knuckles going white. I know this is asking him to choose, and I'm scared he'll pick her like he always has, but I can't keep living with someone watching my every move through my own phone. Noah closes his eyes and takes this long, shaky breath. When he opens them again, there are tears, but he nods once, just once, and says, "Okay." That single word feels like the ground shifting under me. We sit there for another 10 minutes in complete silence, both of us staring straight ahead through the windshield at the empty parking lot. Finally, Noah starts the car, and we drive home separately, and I spend the whole drive gripping my steering wheel and trying not to cry, because I don't know if this is the beginning of something better or the beginning of the end. The next morning, I wake up early and gather every piece of evidence I've collected over the past 2 weeks. I print out the PDF timeline Vikram helped me create, burn the security camera footage onto a thumb drive, and organize all my screenshots into a folder with dates and times clearly labeled. My hands are steady as I pack everything into a manila envelope, which surprises me because inside I feel like I'm about to jump out of my skin. I drive to the police station and ask the front desk officer if Kenzie is available. She comes out 15 minutes later and leads me to a small interview room that smells like old coffee and cleaning solution. I spread everything out on the table between us and walk her through the whole timeline, starting with the spyware discovery and ending with yesterday's Instagram test. Kenzie takes notes on a yellow legal pad and asks me specific questions about dates and times. When I show her the video footage of Danielle pacing outside our door exactly 12 minutes after my fake pregnancy text, Kenzie's eyebrows go up. She tells me this is one of the most well-documented harassment cases she's seen in her 8 years as an officer. Hearing that from someone in law enforcement makes something tight in my chest finally loosen a little. We spend 90 minutes going through everything, and Kenzie types up a formal incident report while I sit there watching her fingers move across the keyboard. She prints it out and has me sign it, then files it in the system with a case number. Before I leave, she tells me she'll be calling Danielle this afternoon to document the harassment report and explain the potential consequences. I'm back home making lunch when my phone rings with Kenzie's number. She tells me she just got off the phone with Danielle and it went exactly as expected. Danielle spent the first 5 minutes crying and insisting this was all a big misunderstanding, that she was just worried about me and trying to be a good sister. Then she switched to anger, saying I was trying to destroy her relationship with Noah. Kenzie stayed calm and professional throughout, explaining that regardless of intention, the surveillance was illegal, and any further unwanted contact could result in criminal charges. She told Danielle that a formal harassment report had been filed and that she needed to cease all contact immediately. After Kenzie hangs up, I sit on my couch for a while just staring at my phone, waiting for the explosion I know is coming. It happens around 6 that evening. Noah comes home from work and his phone immediately starts buzzing with a text from Danielle. He shows it to me and my stomach drops even though I was expecting something like this. The message says she can't live without him, and she's going to hurt herself because he's abandoned her and chosen me over his own blood. I watch Noah's face go pale as he reads it. My first instinct is to grab my keys and tell him we need to go check on her, because that's what we've always done. But Noah is already opening a new message and I see his hands shaking as he types. He forwards Danielle's text to Kenzie's number with a brief explanation. Then he pulls up the crisis hotline number we found during our counseling session and sends that to Danielle in response. His whole body is trembling and there are tears running down his face, but he doesn't get in his car. He doesn't rush over to rescue her. He sits down on our couch next to me and puts his phone face down on the coffee table. I want to say something, but I don't know what, so instead I just sit close to him while he cries. Kenzie calls back 40 minutes later to say she's arranged for a welfare check through the proper channels. We wait together on the couch, not talking, just existing in this horrible space where we don't know if Danielle is actually in danger or if this is another manipulation. An hour after that, we get a call from Kenzie confirming that officers went to Danielle's apartment and she's upset but physically safe. Noah's whole body sags with relief and guilt at the same time. I can see it written all over his face. This war between knowing he did the right thing and feeling like he abandoned his sister in a crisis. He keeps picking up his phone and putting it back down, his leg bouncing with nervous energy. But he doesn't call her and he doesn't drive over there. The pattern we've been trapped in for months, where Danielle creates a crisis and Noah drops everything to fix it, that pattern just broke. It doesn't feel good or triumphant like I thought it might. It just feels heavy and sad and necessary. The next morning, Noah and I sit at our kitchen table with our laptops and phones spread out between us. We spend 3 hours creating a complete security plan. New passwords for everything. Nothing recycled or similar to old ones. 2-factor authentication on every account that offers it. We set up new email addresses that Danielle has never seen and start migrating our important accounts. Noah suggests we create a shared password manager so we both have access to everything. No secrets. We write down an agreement that any communication from Danielle, no matter how it comes in, gets shared with both of us immediately. No more private conversations or texts that only one of us sees. We both sign it and date it, which feels weirdly formal but also important. For the first time since I discovered the spyware, I feel like Noah and I are actually on the same team, instead of him being pulled between his sister and his girlfriend. I spend the rest of that afternoon systematically changing every password I have. Banking, email, social media, streaming services, shopping accounts, everything. I create new email addresses using combinations of words Danielle would never guess. My main email becomes a completely random string of letters and numbers. I set up 2-factor authentication using my phone number and backup codes that I write down and hide in my desk drawer. Every account that offers biometric locks gets them turned on. My phone now requires my fingerprint and a 6-digit code. My laptop needs my fingerprint to even wake up. I'm building walls around my digital life that Danielle can't breach anymore, and with each password I change, I feel a little bit more like I'm taking back control. It takes me 4 hours to get through everything, and by the end my eyes hurt from staring at screens, but I feel safer than I have in months. That evening, Noah and I sit together and write a text message to Danielle. We go through 7 drafts before we get the wording right. It needs to be clear and firm without being cruel. It needs to establish the boundary without leaving room for negotiation. The final version says he won't be responding to any contact for the next 30 days and provides only the crisis hotline number for emergencies. We define emergency as immediate physical danger. Nothing else. Noah's hand is shaking, so hard when he goes to hit send that I have to look away. I hear the swoosh sound of the message going through, and then Noah puts his phone down on the counter like it burned him. He stands there with his arms wrapped around himself, and I can see he's trying not to cry. I know how much this costs him, how deeply it goes against every instinct he has to protect his sister. But he did it anyway, and I'm proud of him, even though proud feels like a weird emotion to have about something this painful. Over the next few days, I check Danielle's Instagram periodically, just enough to screen for actual safety concerns. Her posts become this roller coaster of emotions that would be almost funny if it wasn't so concerning. First, there's a vague post about betrayal and people showing their true colors. Then 6 hours later, there's a bright, cheerful selfie with a caption about self-care and growth. The next day, it's an angry quote about fake people and toxic relationships. Then another cheerful post about trying a new restaurant alone and loving it. The whiplash is intense. I screenshot everything with timestamps, but I don't engage and I don't share the posts with anyone except Noah. Joyce talked about disengagement in our session, about how sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is stop participating in someone else's chaos. So I practice that art of watching without reacting, documenting without engaging, staying aware without getting pulled back in. 2 weeks after we set the no-contact boundary, I meet Lena at the same coffee shop where we first talked. She's already there when I arrive, sitting at a corner table with a stack of papers in front of her. I order a coffee and sit down across from her. Lena explains that the next step is sending a formal civil cease and desist letter that specifically demands deletion of any data Danielle obtained through the spyware. She shows me a draft she's prepared using legal language about unauthorized access to electronic communications and violation of privacy rights. The letter lists every piece of evidence we have and demands that Danielle immediately delete all data, photos, messages, and information she obtained through the surveillance. It also demands that she provide written confirmation of deletion. Lena explains that having this formal legal documentation is important because it's not just about stopping future harm, it's about addressing the violation that already happened. My data, my private messages and photos and searches, they're still out there on whatever device Danielle used to mirror my phone. Getting legal language around data deletion feels crucial. Like I'm not just protecting my future privacy, but also reclaiming my past privacy that was stolen from me. That night, I text Vikram asking if he can help me put together a technical document that explains all the spyware stuff in a way that lawyers and judges could understand. He responds within 5 minutes saying he's free tomorrow evening, and I should bring my laptop with all the evidence files. The next evening, I meet him at a quiet library study room, and he's already set up with his own laptop and a legal pad covered in notes. We spend 3 hours going through everything I found on my phone, with Vikram typing up explanations about what each permission means and how the mirroring process works. He creates screenshots with arrows pointing to specific settings and writes descriptions like, "This permission allows real-time camera access without user notification," in language that sounds official, but isn't too technical. By the time we finish, we have a 12-page appendix that lists every single thing the spyware could do, when it was installed, and all the steps I've taken since to secure my devices. Vikram saves it as a PDF and emails it to both me and himself as backup. Then he looks at me and says he's really proud of how I've handled this whole situation. I thank him about 5 times because without his help, I would have been completely lost trying to explain the technical side of things, and I promise to buy him dinner somewhere really nice once this is all over. 3 weeks after our first counseling session, Noah and I go back to see Joyce. This time the room feels less tense. Maybe because we both know what to expect, or maybe because we've been doing better at home. Joyce starts by asking how the past few weeks have been, and I tell her about the no-contact boundary with Danielle, and how Noah has actually stuck to it. Joyce nods and says that today she wants to focus on something called surveillance trauma, which is apparently a real thing that happens when someone's privacy gets violated like mine did. She asks me to describe how I felt when I first discovered the spyware, and I try to put it into words, talking about feeling exposed and violated and like I couldn't trust my own space anymore. Noah sits there listening, and I can see his jaw getting tight. But this time it's not defensive anger. It's more like he's finally understanding how serious this was. Joyce turns to him and asks how he's been processing everything, and he admits that he's been having a hard time with the guilt, knowing his sister did this and that he didn't see it happening. We talk for almost an hour about trust and boundaries and what it means to rebuild after something like this, and it hurts, but it also feels like we're finally being completely honest with each other instead of dancing around the hard stuff. About halfway through the session, Joyce asks Noah directly about his relationship with Danielle before I came into the picture. He shifts in his seat and looks down at his hands before saying that Danielle was basically his best friend and main support person for years. He talks about how after their dad left when they were teenagers, he kind of stepped into this protective role, and Danielle leaned on him for everything. Joyce listens carefully, and then asks if he thinks that dynamic was healthy for either of them, and Noah goes quiet for a long minute before admitting that it probably wasn't. He says he's starting to realize that he let Danielle fill a role she shouldn't have been in, and that by trying to protect her from everything he actually made it harder for her to develop her own coping skills. Joyce writes something on her notepad, and then pulls out a referral card for a therapist who specializes in family enmeshment and codependency issues. She hands it to Noah and suggests he might benefit from working through some of this stuff individually, and instead of immediately saying no like I expected, he actually takes the card and says he'll think about it. That small moment of him considering therapy for himself feels huge, like maybe he's finally ready to work on the patterns that got us here. 2 days later, I'm at work when my phone rings with a number I recognize as the police station. I step into an empty conference room and answer, and it's Officer Kenzie calling with an update. She tells me that my report has been officially logged into their system and assigned a case number, which means it's now part of the permanent record. Kenzie explains that if Danielle violates any of the boundaries we've established, we now have really strong grounds for pursuing a restraining order because the pattern is documented. She also tells me to keep all my evidence organized and accessible for at least 6 months, and to report any new incidents immediately no matter how small they seem. Hearing Kenzie say that the police are taking this seriously, and that we have options if Danielle escalates again, makes me feel safer than I have in months. I thank her and write down the case number in my phone. Then I sit in that conference room for a few extra minutes, just breathing and letting myself feel relieved that the system is actually working the way it's supposed to. The following week, I meet with Lena at her actual law office instead of the coffee shop. Her office is small but professional, with law books lining one wall and a big desk covered in neat stacks of papers. She's printed out the cease and desist letter we drafted along with Vikram's technical appendix, and everything is formatted on official letterhead from her firm. Lena walks me through each section, pointing out the specific language about data deletion and unauthorized surveillance, and my legal rights under state privacy laws. The letter demands that Danielle immediately delete all data she obtained through the spyware, provide written confirmation of deletion, and cease all contact and monitoring. It also includes a clear notice that I'm aware of my legal options and prepared to pursue them if necessary. Lena explains that sending it through her law office instead of just from me personally carries more weight because it shows I have legal representation. I sign the authorization form, and Lena says she'll have it sent via certified mail that afternoon. Watching her seal the envelope and write out Danielle's address feels like I'm drawing a line in the sand that Danielle can't cross without facing real legal consequences, and that feeling of taking official action is both scary and empowering at the same time. For the next week, I check the mail tracking obsessively, watching as the letter makes its way to Danielle's apartment, and then shows as delivered with her signature confirming receipt. After that, I brace myself for some kind of dramatic response, maybe more Instagram posts or texts to Noah or even her showing up somewhere. But instead, what happens is complete silence. Danielle's Instagram goes private overnight, and when I check her profile through a backup account I created, I can see she stopped posting entirely. No more vague quotes, no more childhood photos of her and Noah, nothing. Noah tells me she hasn't texted or called him either, which is wild considering she used to message him multiple times a day. The silence is almost eerie after weeks of constant boundary violations and surveillance and manufactured emergencies. Part of me wonders if it's just the calm before another storm, but another part of me thinks maybe the formal legal intervention actually worked. Either way, I'll take this uneasy peace over active harassment any day, even if I'm still checking over my shoulder and monitoring my devices obsessively. A few days after the letter was delivered, I take my old compromised phone to Vikram during our lunch break. He's set up a small workspace in an unused office, and he's brought an official evidence bag and label from some forensics kit he apparently owns. Vikram carefully places the phone in the bag, seals it, and writes the date and a description on the label in permanent marker. He explains that he's going to store it in a fireproof safe at his apartment where it'll be protected but accessible if I ever need it for legal proceedings. Watching him lock the bag in a small portable safe and then put that safe in his backpack feels weirdly symbolic, like I'm putting this whole nightmare into a box where it can't hurt me anymore. The phone that Danielle used to watch my every move is now sealed away as evidence of what she did. And knowing it's preserved but out of my daily life gives me this sense of closure, even though I know the situation isn't fully resolved yet. Over the next couple weeks, Noah starts going to individual therapy sessions with the counselor Joyce recommended. Every Thursday evening, he leaves for his appointment and comes back an hour later, looking tired but also somehow lighter. He doesn't tell me details about what he discusses, and I don't ask because Joyce helped us understand that we both need some privacy even from each other. But Noah does share his appointment times with me and sends me a quick text when each session ends, which feels like his way of being accountable without oversharing. I appreciate that he's respecting both his own privacy and mine, and it feels like we're slowly learning how to have healthy boundaries with each other, instead of either being completely enmeshed or completely separate. Some evenings after his therapy, he's quiet and needs space, and other evenings he wants to talk about random stuff like what movie we should watch or what we should cook for dinner. I'm learning to follow his lead and give him room to process whatever he's working through without taking it personally. 5 weeks after I first discovered the spyware on my phone, I spend an evening alone in our apartment while Noah is at his therapy session. I sit on the couch with a cup of tea and really think hard about whether I want to stay in this relationship or leave. Part of me is still angry about how long it took him to see what Danielle was doing and how much he rationalized her behavior. Part of me is scared that even with all these boundaries and therapy sessions, he might fall back into old patterns. But another part of me sees how hard he's been working to change, how he's actually going to therapy every week and respecting the no contact rule even when Danielle sent that scary text about hurting herself. I think about the life we've built together and the plans we made before Danielle's surveillance took over everything. After sitting there for almost 2 hours, I decide to give us 60 more days with these non-negotiable boundaries we've established. I'm choosing to trust myself to walk away if things don't continue improving, rather than making a decision based on fear or anger about what already happened. It's not a forever commitment, and it's not me saying everything is fine, but it's me giving both of us a real chance to see if we can build something healthy together. The next morning, Officer Kenzie calls me with another update. She tells me there have been no new incidents reported and no violations of the boundaries we established, which means Danielle is actually respecting the no contact order. Kenzie says the fact that Danielle went completely silent after receiving the cease and desist letter is actually a good sign because it shows she understood the legal implications and chose to back off. She advises me to keep my documentation organized and accessible for 6 months just in case, but she seems cautiously optimistic that the formal intervention worked. Kenzie also reminds me to report anything immediately if Danielle does try to make contact again, no matter how small or innocent it seems. I thank her and hang up feeling this weird mix of relief and lingering anxiety, because part of me still can't quite believe that Danielle is really going to leave us alone after months of obsessive surveillance and interference. But the evidence suggests she is, and I'm trying to let myself feel hopeful about that, instead of waiting for the other shoe to drop. That weekend, Noah and I sit at the kitchen table with his laptop open to a state park's website, scrolling through options that are within 2 hours driving distance. I point to one with hiking trails and a lake. Nothing fancy, but somewhere we can spend the day together without worrying about who might show up or what might get posted online. He nods and clicks through the photos, then looks at me and asks if I want to do this, really do this, and I tell him yes. We agree right then on 2 rules, no exceptions. First, we check in with each other if either of us feels weird or uncomfortable about anything. Second, we post absolutely nothing on social media, not even after we get back. I watch him type the park name into his phone calendar and add both rules in the notes section, and something about seeing him write it all down makes this feel real and possible. The night before the trip, I pack a small backpack with water bottles and snacks, and I catch myself smiling while I'm doing it. It's such a simple thing, planning a day trip to a state park, but after months of canceled dinners and ruined vacations and constant surveillance, simple feels like everything. I zip up the backpack and set it by the door, and for the first time in forever, I'm genuinely excited about something Noah and I are going to do together. The next morning, while I'm getting dressed in comfortable clothes for hiking, I look at my new phone sitting on the dresser and think about how far I've come in the past 6 weeks. My devices are completely secure now with new passwords and 2-factor authentication on everything. I have a full legal paper trail with police reports and cease and desist letters and documented evidence that no one can explain away. Noah goes to therapy every single week, and he's actually working on his boundary issues instead of just talking about them. Danielle hasn't sent a single text or made any kind of contact in over a month, which still makes me nervous sometimes but also gives me hope that maybe she finally got the message. I'm sleeping through the night now without waking up paranoid that someone is watching me through my camera. I feel safer in my own relationship, like it actually belongs to me and Noah instead of being something his sister controlled from the shadows. I'm proud of myself for standing up and demanding the respect I deserved instead of just accepting the situation. Noah and I talked last night about maybe trying to plan Costa Rica again in 6 months if things stay stable like this, and I actually let myself imagine it this time. I can picture us on that trip together, just the 2 of us, without anyone sabotaging it or showing up or having a convenient emergency. The relationship I fought so hard to protect is finally starting to feel like it's really ours, and that's worth everything I went through to get here.